The desert sun hung low on the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in fiery amber as Sarah Blackwood guided her 18-wheeler down the empty stretch of Highway 93. Her blue truck, Ghost Rider, with its hand-painted phantom flames, roared through the desolate landscape, chrome finish catching the dying sunlight like liquid fire. Sarah's weathered hands gripped the wheel with practiced ease, slender fingers tapping to Johnny Cash's "God's Gonna Cut You Down." At 37, her face retained a striking beauty that even harsh desert roads couldn't diminish: high cheekbones, piercing blue eyes, and blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, sun-bleached from countless miles under the southwestern sun. The dashboard held only two personal items: a vintage compass mounted where most drivers hung fuzzy dice and a faded Polaroid tucked into the instrument panel. Sarah never explained either to anyone who'd ridden in her cab. Most knew better than to ask. "Ghost Rider to Rose's stop, you copy?" Sarah spoke into her CB radio, her voice carrying a subtle raspiness. After a moment of static, a warm, motherly voice replied, "Rose's stop here. That you, Sarah, running ahead of schedule, honey. Clear roads and good weather. No sense wasting daylight," Sarah replied with the ghost of a smile. "Got room for one more tonight. For you always. Coffee's hot, and I saved you a slice of apple pie. The good corner booth is waiting." "Much obliged, Rose. ETA 20 minutes. Sarah replaced the handset and rolled her shoulders, easing the tension from hours behind the wheel. As she did, her jacket shifted, revealing the briefest glimpse of a jagged scar along her collarbone, not the kind one gets from a traffic accident. In the distance, the neon sign of Rose's stop emerged from the growing darkness, a beacon of warmth in the middle of nowhere. For most truckers, it was just another rest stop. For Sarah, it was the closest thing to home she'd allowed herself in years. Rose's stop sat at the crossroads of two lonely highways, a time-worn diner and truck stop that had served weary travelers for over 40 years. The building itself was unassuming, a single-story structure with weathered wooden siding, painted a faded red, a wide gravel parking lot, and a buzzing neon sign. Yet among truckers, it was legendary for three things: the best apple pie in 4 states, hot coffee at any hour, and Rose herself. Sarah maneuvered Ghost Rider into her usual spot at the far end of the lot, backing the massive vehicle with precision that often drew admiring glances. Before stepping down, she opened a hidden compartment beneath her sleeping berth and checked its contents: a waterproof case containing several burner phones, a high-end digital camera with telephoto lens, a stack of cash, and a matte black Glock 19 with spare magazines. Her fingers brushed against something else, a small metal case she rarely opened. Tonight, some instinct made her flip the latch. Inside lay a silver medallion embossed with an eagle's head and the letters Atlas beneath it. Sarah stared at it for 3 heartbeats before snapping the case shut and returning it to its hiding place. She touched the compass around her neck before locking the truck and crossing the gravel lot toward the warm glow of the diner windows. As Sarah pushed through the glass door, the bell announced her arrival with a cheerful jingle. The familiar scents of coffee, grilled onions, and baking pastry enveloped her. Despite the late hour, half the booths were occupied mostly by truckers, hunched over plates of Rose's famous meatloaf or burgers. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," came Rose's booming voice from behind the counter. Though in her mid-60s, Rose Dawson moved with the energy of someone half her age. Her silver hair was tied back in a practical bun, and laugh lines framed eyes that missed nothing. "Booth's waiting, honey." "The usual." Sarah nodded, sliding into the corner booth that offered a clear view of both the entrance and the parking lot, a habit so ingrained she no longer recognized it as unusual. "Thanks, Rose." "Don't thank me yet. Got some road news you should hear," Rose said, her voice dropping slightly as she set down a steaming mug of black coffee. "Be back with your food in a jiffy." Sarah's eyes shifted to the small television mounted in the corner. A local news anchor was reporting on increased Border Patrol activities, but the closed captioning told the real story. Sources report escalating concerns about the Road Kings gang expanding operations into northern Arizona with possible connections to cross-border trafficking. Her attention shifted as the diner's door swung open, admitting a burly trucker with a salt and pepper beard. Eddie Kowalski spotted her immediately and raised a hand in greeting. "Blackwood didn't expect to see you until Flagstaff." He ambled over, gesturing to the empty side of her booth. Mind if I join? Sarah nodded, and Eddie settled his considerable frame into the booth with a relieved sigh. Just came down from Utah. Snow's starting early in the passes, he said, waving to Rose for coffee. You still running that crazy route through Beaver Dam? When the schedule calls for it, Sarah replied noncommittally. Eddie leaned forward, lowering his voice. That's Road King's territory now. Most of us are adding 2 hours to go around. Not worth the risk after what happened to Mike Delgado. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. What happened to Mike? You didn't hear truck hijacked 3 weeks back. They found the rig stripped in a ravine, but Mike's still missing. Eddie shook his head grimly. Left behind a wife and 2 kids in Albuquerque. Rose arrived with Sarah's plate, a modest serving of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans, along with a slice of apple pie and coffee for Eddie. Eddie's right, Rose said, sliding into the conversation. 3 rigs hit in the last month. Authorities aren't doing squat about it. Sarah took a slow sip of coffee, her eyes moving back to the television. They ever identify any of the Road Kings involved? Eddie and Rose exchanged glances. Word is there are run by some ex-cartel enforcer calls himself Viper, Eddie offered. Nasty piece of work. Got a snake tattoo crawling up his neck. Sarah's fork paused halfway to her mouth so briefly that neither Rose nor Eddie noticed. Her mind flashed to a classified file photo from years ago, a younger man with the same tattoo standing over a body knife in hand. She pushed the memory away. Sounds like someone to avoid, she said evenly, resuming her meal. Damn straight, Eddie agreed. Though I heard something interesting at the Holbrook stop yesterday. Some independent drivers are talking about organizing protection runs, convoying through the dangerous stretches. That won't end well, Sarah murmured. Rose wiped her hands on her apron. What these roads need is the kind of justice the law books don't cover. My late husband used to say. The diner door swung open, cutting off Rose's words. The conversation throughout the restaurant dimmed as 3 unfamiliar men entered. They weren't truckers, that much was obvious from their clean boots and matching leather jackets emblazoned with a stylized crown. Road King's colors. Sarah's posture didn't change, but her right hand slipped beneath the table closer to the boot, where she kept a ceramic push knife undetectable by metal scanners and just as lethal as steel. The men scanned the diner with calculated nonchalance before settling at the counter. Rose approached them with professional courtesy that didn't quite reach her eyes. Welcome to Rose's stop, gentlemen. What can I get you? The tallest of the 3, a lanky man with a pockmarked face, grinned. Just coffee for now, ma'am. We're waiting on friends. His accent carried hints of the deep South. Rose poured 3 coffees and retreated to the far end of the counter, her expression carefully neutral. Eddie watched the newcomers with undisguised suspicion. Never seen them before, he muttered to Sarah. But those jackets tell me all I need to know. Sarah's eyes hadn't left the men since they entered. Rose said something about road news. Eddie nodded, leaning closer. It's not just the hijackings. The Kings are pressuring businesses along their routes. Protection money preferred shipping contracts, refueling kickbacks, old school intimidation with modern business sense. And Rose turned them down flat last week from what I heard. Brave woman. Eddie glanced at his watch. I should hit the road if I want to make Phoenix by morning. He drained his coffee cup and stood dropping bills on the table. Watch yourself, Blackwood. Highway's not as friendly as it used to be. Sarah nodded, returning her attention to her meal as Eddie made his way out. Through the window, she watched him climb into his rig and pull out onto the highway, red taillights diminishing into the darkness. The diner gradually emptied as the hour grew late, until only Sarah, Rose, the 3 Road Kings, and an elderly couple remained. Sarah lingered over her coffee, making no move to leave, despite having finished her meal long ago. At 11:30 p.m., the door swung open once more. Sarah didn't need to look up to sense the shift in atmosphere, the sudden tension that pulled the air taut. From the corner of her eye, she saw Rose's hands still on the counter, knuckles whitening. Heavy boots crossed the linoleum floor, accompanied by the subtle creaking of leather and the soft jingle of metal chains. The 3 men at the counter straightened, suddenly alert. Boss, one of them acknowledged with a respect that bordered on fear. Sarah raised her eyes at last. The man who stood in the center of the diner was built like a heavyweight boxer, gone to seed once powerful muscles now layered with the softness of middle age but no less imposing for it. He stood well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and ham-sized fists. His face was deeply tanned and weathered with a strong jaw, darkened by stubble, and cold eyes that evaluated everything with predatory calculation. Around his thick neck, a tattoo of a green viper coiled its fanged head, disappearing beneath his collar. "Victor," the lanky man said, "this is the place I was telling you about." Victor Viper Ramirez surveyed the diner with the air of a man evaluating a property he already considered his own. His gaze lingered on Rose, swept past the elderly couple, then settled on Sarah in the corner booth. Something flickered across his face, perhaps surprise at finding a woman alone at this hour, perhaps something else entirely. He approached Rose, spreading his hands on the counter with deliberate slowness. "Mrs. Dawson, I presume I'm Victor Ramirez. I believe my associates mentioned I'd be interested in discussing business opportunities with you." Rose's chin lifted slightly. "They did. I also believe I made my position clear." Victor smiled, revealing a gold tooth among otherwise perfect white teeth. "Clarity is important in business. So is reconsideration when presented with new information." He gestured around the diner. "This is a nice establishment. Been here, 40 years? Shame if something were to happen to it." "Are you threatening me in my own place, Mr. Ramirez?" Rose's voice remained steady, though Sarah noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "Threatening, no. No." Victor chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Just making conversation about the unfortunate accidents that can happen out here in the middle of nowhere. Electrical fires, brake failures on those big rigs. So many hazards for a business owner to worry about." Sarah set down her coffee cup with a deliberate clink that drew all eyes to her corner. She didn't speak, merely held Victor's gaze with an unwavering stare that most men would find unsettling. Victor's eyes narrowed fractionally. "Friend of yours, Ms. Dawson?" he asked, not looking away from Sarah. "Valued customer," Rose replied tersely. Victor's mouth curved in what might generously be called a smile. "Well, don't let me interrupt your evening, ma'am," he said to Sarah, his tone suggesting she should mind her own business. "Sauce, Dawson and I are just having a friendly chat about real estate values." Sarah's voice, when it finally came, carried a quiet authority that seemed to expand to fill the room. "Seems to me the lady's not interested in selling." A heavy silence followed her words. The 3 men at the counter tensed, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. Victor himself seemed momentarily taken aback by her directness before his expression hardened. "And you are?" he prompted, turning fully to face her. "Someone passing through," Sarah replied, her gaze steady. "Someone who appreciates good pay and honest businesses." Victor studied her for a long moment, his eyes cataloging details, the subtle strength in her arms, the weathered hands, the cautious posture of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. His gaze lingered briefly on the compass, hanging at her throat. "Independent trucker," he said, finally having reached his conclusion. "Solo operator, long-haul specialist." His lip curled slightly. "Lady, I admire your courage, but this conversation doesn't involve you. When you threaten the only decent stop on this stretch of highway, it involves everyone who uses these roads." Sarah maintained her calm, though her senses had shifted to high alert, tracking the positions of all 4 men, noting their likely weapons, calculating distances to exits. Victor's expression darkened. He took a step toward her booth, looming over the table. "You know I've got nothing against female truckers. Progress right, but they tend to be smarter about recognizing dangerous situations." He leaned down, placing his palms flat on the table. "So let me help you recognize one walk out. Now get in your rig and drive away. Forget what you heard." Sarah didn't flinch at his proximity. Instead, something dangerous flickered in her eyes there and gone so quickly that Victor almost missed it. Almost. "I've got a better idea," she said, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. "You take your boys and leave Ms. Dawson alone. Find another route for your business opportunities." Victor's laugh was genuine this time, if cruel. He straightened and turned to his men. "You hear that, boys? The lady trucker is giving me business advice." His amusement vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "I don't think you understand how things work around here now." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Sarah replied, and something in her tone made Victor pause. I understand you're running product up from Nogales through Beaver Dam, cutting across reservation land to avoid checkpoints. I understand 3 of your shipments have been seized in the last month, putting you under pressure from your suppliers. And I understand you're expanding into cargo theft to cover your losses, including the Delgado hijacking that went bad. The diner fell deathly silent. Victor's face went very still, the muscle in his jaw working as he stared at Sarah with new intensity. His men exchanged nervous glances, hands now openly moving toward weapons. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice a dangerous growl. Sarah held his gaze without blinking. "Just someone who pays attention." This was the first twist, Sarah revealing she knew far more than any random trucker should about the Road King's operations. It wasn't just a lucky guess or trucker's gossip. Her knowledge was detailed, specific, and accurate enough to visibly rattle Victor. Victor's hands shot out, gripping Sarah's wrist with crushing force. "You're either a cop or dead. Which is it?" "Neither," Sarah replied calmly, despite the bruising pressure on her arm. "But if you don't release me in the next 3 seconds, you might find yourself wishing I was a cop." Victor's grip tightened further. "Big talk from—" His words cut off abruptly as Sarah's free hand moved in a blur, driving stiffened fingers into a precise point between his ribs. Victor's breath escaped in a pained whoosh, his grip involuntarily loosening. Sarah didn't press her advantage, simply reclaimed her arm and remained seated. "That was 1, she said quietly. "I don't want to count to 3. Victor stumbled back a step, more surprised than injured, his face contorting with rage. His 3 companions had half risen from their stools, hands reaching inside jackets. "Stand down," Victor barked at them, his eyes never leaving Sarah. The cold calculation had returned to his expression. "Ms. Dawson, I think we'll continue our conversation another time. As for you," he addressed Sarah, "I'll be looking forward to seeing you on the road." The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. "I'll be the one in the blue truck," Sarah replied evenly. "Can't miss it." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. He gestured to his men, and they filed out of the diner without another word. Through the window, Sarah watched them mount motorcycles, except for Victor, who climbed into a black Ford F-350 with tinted windows. The convoy pulled away, gravel crunching under tires. Rose exhaled shakily once they were gone, bracing herself against the counter. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Sarah, what were you thinking?" Sarah rose and moved to the window, watching the taillights disappear down the highway. "You should close early tonight, Rose. And you should get back on the road far away from here," Rose countered, coming around the counter to lock the door. The elderly couple had already slipped out during the confrontation. "Those weren't ordinary thugs. The Road Kings have killed people for less than what you just did." Sarah turned to face the older woman, her expression softening slightly. "I appreciate the concern, but I can handle myself." Rose studied her with knowing eyes. "I know you can, honey, that's what worries me." She sighed, flipping the sign to closed. "Stay in the guest room tonight. I don't like the idea of you alone in that truck after Ramirez's threat." Sarah shook her head. "Better if I stick to routine, but I'll park where I can keep an eye on the diner." Rose didn't look happy, but nodded her acceptance. "At least take some fresh coffee for the road." "And Sarah," her voice grew serious, "how did you know all that about their operation?" Sarah's expression revealed nothing. "Let's just say I pay attention to patterns." Rose's eyes narrowed skeptically, but she didn't press further. As she prepared a thermos of coffee, she called over her shoulder, "You remind me of someone you know, my late husband." He had that same look in his eyes, like he was carrying the weight of secrets nobody should have to bear. Sarah accepted the thermos with a nod of thanks. "Your husband was military." "Among other things," Rose replied cryptically. "Served in places that never showed up on any official record. Came home with skills they don't teach in basic training." She paused, studying Sarah's face. "Kind of like how no ordinary trucker moves the way you just did with Ramirez." Sarah met her gaze steadily. "We all have our pasts, Rose." "That we do," Rose patted her hand. "But some pasts have a way of catching up no matter how far we drive." Sarah touched the compass at her throat and nodded. "I'll keep watch tonight. If you see or hear anything unusual, flash your porch light 3 times. I'll be here in under a minute." As Sarah walked back to her truck through the now empty parking lot, she scanned the surroundings with practiced precision. The desert night had grown cold, stars brilliantly clear in the vast sky above. She unlocked Ghost Rider and climbed into the cab, but didn't immediately start the engine. Instead, she reached for one of the burner phones in her hidden compartment. She dialed a number from memory, waiting as it rang exactly twice before disconnecting. 30 seconds later, the phone vibrated with an incoming text. "Secure line open. Proceed," Sarah typed rapidly. "Atlas asset sighting confirmed. Viper in EAS 93 corridor. Proceeding with observation." The reply came almost instantly. "Maintain distance. Observation only. Backup available if required." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before typing her response. "Negative. Local asset compromised. Escalating to intervention." There was a longer pause before the final reply appeared. "Acknowledged. Your call, Nightingale. Watch your six." Sarah powered down the phone and removed its battery and SIM card. Then she started the engine, maneuvering Ghost Rider to a position that afforded a clear view of both the diner and the highway. She wouldn't sleep tonight, not with Victor Ramirez now aware of her presence and potentially planning retaliation. From a compartment beneath her seat, she retrieved a high-powered spotting scope and trained it on the distant highway, watching for any vehicles that might approach the diner. As she settled in for her vigil, her mind drifted back to a time when surveillance had been more than an occasional necessity, when it had been her life. 8 years earlier, undisclosed location, Northern Virginia. "Operation Serpentine is now active," Director Marshall Hayes said, sliding a dossier across the table. "You're our best deep cover operative, Nightingale. We need you on this." Sarah, then known by a different name, sat ramrod straight, her hair cut short in a practical bob, wearing the nondescript business attire that was the unofficial uniform of government operatives who needed to blend in anywhere. She opened the file, studying the photographs of a younger Victor, his face less weathered, but no less dangerous. "Wet work specialist for the Sonora cartel before a leadership dispute forced him out," she read aloud. "Now building his own network on our side of the border." "He's not just another cartel thug," Hayes warned. "West Point educated before he went off the grid. Uses legitimate businesses as fronts, employs ex-military, maintains strict operational security." Hayes tapped a satellite image showing a compound in the desert. "We believe he's moved beyond drugs into weapons trafficking, possibly with international connections." "Why Atlas instead of DEA or FBI?" Sarah asked, flipping through intelligence reports. Hayes' expression darkened. "Because we have reason to believe Ramirez has protection, high-level government protection. This operation doesn't officially exist, Nightingale. No backup, no extraction plan if you're compromised." "Budapest all over again," Sarah murmured, a shadow crossing her face. Hayes had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Budapest was regrettable, but you were the only operative who made it out alive. That's why you're perfect for this." Sarah closed the file. "Parameters: deep cover, minimum 6 months. Infiltrate, identify his government connection, gather actionable intelligence on supply routes and contacts." Hayes slid another thinner file across the table. "Your new identity. Memorize it, then destroy it." Sarah opened the second file. "Sarah Blackwood, long-haul trucker. Perfect cover for monitoring border activity without raising suspicion. We've arranged for the necessary licenses, background history, and a custom rig that's been modified for your needs." As Sarah began to study the file, Hayes added quietly, "There's one more thing you should know. Your handler for this operation will be a retired Atlas agent living in the area. Codename Thorn." Sarah's head snapped up. "Rose Dawson is still active." "Not officially, but she runs a diner that's perfectly positioned as a communication point, and she knows the region better than anyone. She's agreed to come back for this operation only." Sarah nodded slowly. "The legendary Rose Thorn. I trained on her case files at the academy." "She specifically requested you," Hayes said. "Said she saw something of herself in your Budapest performance review." Sarah wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not. Rose Thorn Dawson was a Cold War legend who had run some of Atlas's most dangerous operations behind the Iron Curtain. That she would come out of retirement for this mission spoke volumes about its importance. "When do I begin?" Sarah asked, already mentally preparing to disappear into her new identity. "Wheels up in 6 hours. You'll meet your truck at a secure location in Phoenix." Hayes stood, signaling the end of the briefing. "Nightingale, the people Ramirez is working with, They have reach into every branch of government. Trust no one except Rose. Not even me. Stop. Present day. The memory dissolved as Sarah caught movement on the highway headlights approaching from the direction the Road Kings had departed. She focused the spotting scope, tension easing slightly when she recognized a familiar semi-truck rather than Victor's black Ford. Eddie Kowalski's rig pulled into Rose's parking lot despite the closed sign. Sarah watched as he hurried to the diner's door, knocking urgently until Rose appeared to let him in. Their conversation was brief but animated, with Eddie gesturing down the highway and Rose glancing repeatedly towards Sarah's truck. After a moment, Rose flashed the porch light 3 times. Sarah tucked the spotting scope away and exited her cab, moving silently across the gravel lot. As she approached, Eddie emerged from the diner, his expression grim. "Blackwood," he called, relief evident in his voice. "Thank God you're still here." "But what's wrong, Eddie?" "Roadblock about 15 miles south, men in Road King's colors checking trucks. They're looking for someone specific." His eyes met hers meaningfully. "A female driver in a blue truck with flame detailing." Sarah's expression hardened. "How many?" "At least 6 that I could see, all armed." Eddie ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I doubled back to warn you. They're stopping everyone, getting aggressive with the searches." Rose appeared in the doorway behind him. "Sarah, you can't go south now. There's another route through." "No," Sarah cut her off. "This needs to end before more drivers get hurt." She turned to Eddie. "Thank you for the warning. You should both stay here, lock the doors." Eddie blinked in confusion. "What are you going to do?" Sarah was already walking back to her truck. Over her shoulder, she called, "Making a phone call." Back in Ghost Rider's cab, Sarah retrieved a different burner phone and dialed another memorized number. This call connected immediately. "It's Nightingale," she said without preamble. "Situation escalating on Highway 93. Road Kings setting up checkpoints targeting civilian vehicles. I need real-time satellite coverage and possibly backup." The voice that responded was crisp and professional. "Assets in your area are limited, Nightingale. Nearest support is 2 hours out minimum. Not acceptable. Civilians at risk." "Understood, but protocol." "Override protocol Alpha 7 Tango," Sarah interrupted. "Director Hayes' authorization still active in system." A pause. "Affirmative." "Then get me what I need. Sending coordinates now." She rattled off the location of the roadblock Eddie had described. "And run a deep search on Rose Dawson, owner of Rose's Stop on Highway 93. Something doesn't add up there." "Stand by. Search initiated. Satellite repositioning for your coordinates. 18-minute delay for coverage." "Make it 10, Sarah replied before ending the call. She started Ghost Rider's engine, its rumble filling the quiet night. Through the windshield, she could see Rose and Eddie watching from the diner doorway, concern etched on both faces. Sarah pulled around to the diner's rear entrance, out of sight from the highway. She needed those 10 minutes to prepare. From various hidden compartments throughout the truck, she assembled what she would need: a tactical vest beneath her flannel shirt, the Glock secured in a shoulder holster, a backup weapon strapped to her ankle, and communication equipment that no ordinary trucker would possess. As she worked, her mind processed the facts with cold efficiency. Victor had escalated too quickly. Setting up a roadblock within hours of their confrontation was not the action of someone merely defending territory. It suggested personal offense, yes, but also something more: fear. She had rattled him with her knowledge of his operation. The burner phone buzzed with an incoming message. Sarah checked it to find a satellite image of the roadblock location, timestamped just 2 minutes earlier. The resolution was military grade, showing heat signatures of 8 individuals in various vehicles arranged across the highway. A second message followed: search results, Rose Dawson, born Rosalind McIntyre, former Atlas handler, 1982 to 1995, specialized in deep cover operations, retired after Budapest incident. Sarah froze, staring at the message. Not just any Atlas handler, Rose had been involved in Budapest, the operation that had nearly killed Sarah and had completely changed the trajectory of her career. The one mission she never spoke about, the one that had left her with the scar across her collarbone and nightmares that still woke her in cold sweats. Had Rose recognized something in Sarah from the beginning? Had she been watching her all along, reporting back to Atlas? Or had their paths crossing been genuine coincidence? No time to process that now. The roadblock demanded immediate attention. Sarah completed her preparations and put Ghost Rider in gear, circling back to the front of the diner. Rose and Eddie still stood in the doorway, and Sarah rolled down her window as she approached. "I need you both to stay inside, away from windows," she called. "Whatever you hear, don't come out until I return or contact you." Eddie looked bewildered, but Rose's expression had changed. The motherly diner owner was gone, replaced by someone sharper, more calculating. She gave Sarah a single professional nod of understanding. "Be careful, Nightingale," Rose said quietly, using the code name that she should have had no way of knowing. Sarah's eyes widened fractionally, but she recovered quickly. "We'll talk when I get back," she promised before accelerating onto the highway southbound toward the roadblock. As Ghost Rider ate up the miles, Sarah toggled switches that activated systems far beyond standard trucking equipment. The running lights dimmed to reduce visibility, while thermal imaging displayed on a screen that rose from the dashboard, giving her enhanced vision of the road ahead. In the distance, she could make out the faint glow of lights, where there should be none, the Road King's checkpoint. Sarah reduced her speed, maintaining a steady approach that wouldn't trigger immediate alarm. Her right hand moved to the Glock, confirming it was accessible, while her mind ran through tactical scenarios. 8 armed men against 1 would be suicide in a direct confrontation. But Sarah had never been trained for direct confrontations. Atlas operatives specialize in asymmetric approaches, creating chaos, exploiting weaknesses, and changing the parameters of engagement. Victor wanted to find her fine. She would let him find exactly what he was looking for, but on her terms, not his. 5 miles from the roadblock, Sarah pulled Ghost Rider onto a barely visible access road, a maintenance track that paralleled the highway, but remained hidden from view by a ridge of desert hills. This approach would position her behind the Road King's checkpoint, allowing observation before engagement. Sarah killed the engine and continued on foot, moving with the silent efficiency that had once made her Atlas's premier infiltration specialist. The desert night was her ally, its darkness providing cover as she approached the ridge overlooking the roadblock. Lying prone on the hillside, she used her spotting scope to assess the situation. The Road Kings had positioned vehicles across both lanes, 2 pickup trucks and several motorcycles. Portable floodlights illuminated the checkpoint, powered by a generator whose hum carried through the still desert air. Armed men searched vehicles, their manner growing increasingly aggressive with each truck that wasn't hers. Victor himself paced beside the lead pickup, checking his watch periodically, his face tight with frustration. Through the scope, Sarah could read his lips as he berated one of his men. "She should have been through by now. Check the CB channels again." Sarah reached for her burner phone and typed rapidly, "8 hostiles armed. Civilian trucks being detained. Requesting authorization for offensive action." The reply came seconds later. "Authorization granted. Satellite support active. Minimize civilian exposure." Sarah tucked the phone away and retreated down the hillside to her truck. Time to change the rules of engagement. If Victor wanted to find Sarah Blackwood, the trucker, she would make sure he found Nightingale instead. 20 minutes later, a lone motorcycle approached the Road King's checkpoint from the north, the direction of Rose's stop. The rider wore standard trucker attire, flannel shirt, jeans, and boots, with a trucker cap pulled low and a bandana covering the lower half of their face against the desert dust. The Road Kings tensed as the motorcycle slowed. One of them stepped forward, hand resting on a holstered pistol. "Road's closed tonight, friend. Turn around," he said to him. The rider cut the engine but remained seated on the bike. "Looking for Victor," came the muffled response from behind the bandana. Victor emerged from behind one of the pickups, eyes narrowing as he studied the new arrival. "Who's asking?" The rider removed the cap and bandana in one motion, revealing Sarah's face. "You wanted to find me. Here I am." Victor's surprise quickly morphed into a predatory smile. "Well, well, the lady trucker with the big mouth." He gestured to his men, who began to spread out, surrounding her. "Where's your precious blue truck?" "Safe," Sarah replied calmly, seemingly unconcerned by the armed men encircling her. "I figured this conversation would be more productive one-on-one. Send your boys home, Victor." Victor laughed, the sound echoing across the desert. "You've got guts, lady, I'll give you that. But you're not calling the shots here." He approached until he stood just beyond arm's reach. "You know too much about my business. I want to know who you're working for." "I work for myself," Sarah said. "Independent operator, remember." Victor's hand shot out, grabbing her by the throat and lifting her partially off the motorcycle. "Wrong answer. FBI, DEA, or are you cartel enforcement sent to check up on me? Despite the pressure on her windpipe, Sarah remained calm, her eyes cold and calculating now locked with Victor's. You're making a mistake, she managed to say. The only mistake was letting you walk away back at the diner, Victor snarled, tightening his grip. Now last chance, who are you working for? Sarah's response was not what Victor expected. Instead of struggling or pleading, she smiled a predator's smile that momentarily unsettled him. Her right hand moved with blinding speed, pressing something small and metallic against his side. I work for people who use things like this, she said quietly. Victor felt the unmistakable shape of a taser pressed against his ribs. Before he could react, electricity surged through his body. His muscles convulsed his grip on Sarah's throat, releasing as he collapsed to the ground, temporarily paralyzed. The Road Kings reacted immediately, drawing weapons and shouting. But Sarah was already moving, rolling off the motorcycle as it toppled, using Victor's prone form as momentary cover. What happened next occurred with such speed and precision that the Road Kings would later struggle to describe it coherently. Sarah seemed to flow like water between them, never where their weapons pointed, always a step ahead of their reactions. Two men went down before they fully registered. She was upon them, precise strikes to pressure points, leaving them unconscious on the asphalt. A third fired wildly, bullets sparking off the pavement as Sarah ducked and pivoted. She closed the distance in a heartbeat, disarming him with a technique that left his wrist fractured and his gun in her hand. She didn't fire it, instead using it as a blunt instrument to incapacitate him with a sharp blow to the temple. The remaining gang members scattered for cover, their confidence shattered by the explosive violence of her counterattack. Sarah moved methodically from one to the next, exploiting their panic and lack of coordination. Her movements had the fluid efficiency of someone who had trained for decades, conserving energy and maximizing impact. In less than 40 seconds, 7 of the 8 Road Kings lay incapacitated on the asphalt. Only Victor remained, struggling to his feet as the taser's effects began to wear off. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and disbelief as he beheld the scene around him. What the hell are you? He demanded, reaching for a backup weapon at his ankle. Sarah kicked it from his hand before he could bring it to bear. Someone who gave you a chance to walk away. She advanced on him, her movements measured and deliberate. I know about the weapons, Victor. Russian-made, coming through Mexico, destined for domestic terrorist cells. That's why you're expanding north, creating a distribution network. Victor's eyes widened. You can't possibly. Your government contact, Sarah continued, cutting him off. The one who ensures your shipments don't get flagged at the border. Who is it? Victor's surprise gave way to calculation. You really don't know, do you? You're fishing. A smile spread across his face. If you knew half of what you think you do, you wouldn't be out here alone. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made Victor take an involuntary step back. I'm going to find out, Victor. The only question is whether you help me voluntarily or whether things get unpleasant. Victor glanced around at his fallen men, reassessing the woman before him. You're no trucker, he said finally. Fed military. Does it matter? Sarah countered. Victor spat on the ground. It matters because you're dead either way. You have no idea what you're stepping into. His hand moved to his jacket pocket and Sarah tensed, but he merely withdrew a phone. You think I'm the threat? I'm just the middleman. The real power is so far above your pay grade you can't even imagine. Try me, Sarah said coldly. Victor's thumb hovered over the phone's screen. One call and everything changes. Your cover blown. Your handlers exposed. That nice little diner you're so fond of burned to the ground with Rose inside. Sarah went very still. You're bluffing. Victor's smile widened. Why don't we find out? His thumb descended toward the screen. Sarah moved with devastating speed, closing the distance between them in a blur. Her hand clamped around Victor's wrist with crushing force, bones grinding together as he cried out in pain, the phone clattering to the asphalt. She swept his legs from under him, driving him face first into the road surface with controlled violence. His nose broke with an audible crack, blood spattering across the asphalt. Before he could recover, Sarah had him in a submission, hold her knee pressed between his shoulder blades, one arm twisted painfully behind him. That call you were about to make, she said, her voice deadly quiet. Who was it to? Victor laughed through the pain, blood bubbling from his nostrils. You'll never know. Sarah increased the pressure on his arm until he gasped. There are 27 pressure points in the human body that can cause excruciating pain without permanent damage. I know them all, Victor. Again, who were you calling? Go to hell, he snarled. Sarah leaned closer. You first. What followed was a masterclass in interrogation techniques that Atlas had perfected over decades' methodical application of pain balanced precisely at the threshold of human tolerance. Sarah worked with the detached efficiency of a surgeon, her face betraying nothing, as Victor's defiance gradually crumbled. Finally, gasping and trembling, he broke. Arlington. The contact is in Arlington. Department of Defense. Sarah went very still. Name. I don't have a name. We use a secure channel code phrases. Mid-level bureaucrat with high-level access. Victor's breathing was ragged. That's all I know, I swear. The shipments come north, we distribute to designated locations. The money appears in offshore accounts. The next shipment, 3 days from now, Nogales crossing midnight, using produce trucks from Grand Vista Farms as cover. Victor's eyes held a mixture of pain and resignation. You've signed your death warrant. They'll know about you before sunrise. Sarah studied him for a long moment, weighing options. If anything happens to Rose or her diner, I'll find you again. And this conversation will seem pleasant by comparison. She applied pressure to a specific point at the base of his skull, and Victor's eyes rolled back as unconsciousness claimed him. Standing, Sarah surveyed the scene. 8 unconscious men vehicles blocking the highway and a handful of truck drivers watching in stunned silence from their detained vehicles. She needed to move quickly. First, she secured Victor and his men with their own zip ties, dragging them clear of the roadway. Then she approached the civilian truckers, holding up empty hands to show she meant no harm. Highway's clear now, she told them calmly. I'd appreciate it if you'd continue your routes without mentioning what happened here. These men have friends who wouldn't hesitate to retaliate against witnesses. The truckers, 5 men of varying ages, stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to admiration. You're Blackwood, aren't you? One of them asked. Ghost Rider's driver, Sarah nodded once. Eddie Kowalski called on the CB, warned us all about this checkpoint. The trucker continued, said they were hunting you specifically. He glanced at the unconscious road kings. Guess they found more than they bargained for. They'll be unconscious for at least an hour, Sarah said. Authorities are on their way. I suggest you all be well down the road by then. The truckers needed no further encouragement. They returned to their vehicles, engines rumbling to life as they maneuvered around the roadblock. Several gave Sarah respectful nods as they passed. Once they were gone, Sarah retrieved Victor's phone from where it had fallen. The screen was cracked but still functional. She accessed the recent calls list, memorizing the numbers, then placed it in Victor's pocket. From her own pocket, she withdrew a small flat device and attached it to the underside of the phone, a tracker that would activate when the phone was next used. She turned her attention to the vehicles. The motorcycles she left where they stood, but she searched both pickup trucks thoroughly. In the second one, beneath a false floor in the truck bed, she discovered what she was looking for, a sealed crate containing automatic weapons, AR-15s, modified for fully automatic fire with illegal conversion kits. Sarah used her burner phone to photograph the weapons and the unconscious men before sending a simple text, evidence secured, subject subdued. Local authorities can find weapons trafficking evidence at attached coordinates. The reply was immediate, acknowledged. Extraction. Sarah considered for a moment before responding, negative. Maintaining cover. Following lead on DOD connection. She pocketed the phone and made one final sweep of the area, ensuring she had left nothing that could be traced back to her. Then she returned to her motorcycle, kick-starting it with a single fluid motion. As she prepared to depart, she heard the distant wail of sirens right on schedule. Sarah guided the motorcycle off the highway and into the desert, following the same maintenance track that had allowed her to approach undetected. Ghost Rider waited where she had left it, its massive blue form gleaming faintly in the starlight. Inside the cab, she quickly changed back into her regular clothes and secured her weapons. The motorcycle, borrowed from Rose's small garage behind the diner, was stowed in Ghost Rider's specialized cargo compartment, designed specifically for transporting vehicles without attracting attention. Sarah started the truck's engine, its powerful rumble a stark contrast to the silence of the desert night. As she pulled back onto Highway 93 heading north toward Rose's stop, her mind was already processing the implications of what Victor had revealed. A Department of Defense connection, weapons trafficking with potential domestic terrorism links, and a conspiracy significant enough that Victor, a hardened criminal, feared it more than he feared her. The mission that had begun 8 years ago as a simple intelligence gathering operation had just evolved into something far more complex and dangerous. Sarah had maintained her cover as a trucker for years, gradually disconnecting from active Atlas operations. Now it seemed the past had found her, despite her best efforts to outrun it. As Ghost Rider ate up the miles back to Rose's stop, Sarah's thoughts turned to the former Atlas handler who had been hiding in plain sight all this time. Rose had recognized her, had perhaps been watching over her on behalf of the agency. The coincidence was too great to be accidental. The Budapest connection was the missing piece. Rose had been the handler on that doomed operation, the one that had left Sarah scarred both physically and mentally. Was Rose's presence here punishment, surveillance, or protection? Sarah intended to find out. The diner came into view, its lights still burning despite the late hour. Sarah could see two figures waiting on the porch, Rose and Eddie. She pulled into the parking lot and shut down the engine, taking a moment to center herself before stepping out. Rose met her gaze across the lot, and an unspoken understanding passed between them, the recognition of shared history and secrets. Whatever came next would begin with a long overdue conversation between two women who had served the same shadowy masters in different times, but with the same dedication. As Sarah approached the diner, she touched the compass hanging at her throat. Not a nervous habit, but a reminder of the oath she had taken, the promise she had made to uphold justice, even when justice operated in the shadows. The game had changed tonight. Sarah Blackwood had emerged from the comfortable anonymity of her trucker persona, revealing glimpses of Nightingale to those who knew where to look. And somewhere in Arlington, in an office at the Department of Defense, someone would soon learn that their carefully constructed operation was now under scrutiny from a ghost they never saw coming. Sarah mounted the steps to the diner porch, her expression revealing nothing of the storm brewing within. "We need to talk, Rose," she said quietly, "about Budapest, about Atlas, and about what happens next." Rose's eyes widened fractionally, the only indication of her surprise. Then she nodded, holding the door open. "I've been waiting 8 years for this conversation, Nightingale. Come inside. The coffee's fresh and we have a lot to discuss before sunrise." Rose locked the diner door behind them, flipping the blinds closed with practiced efficiency. Eddie Kowalski sat at the counter, his broad face etched with confusion. He looked from Rose to Sarah and back again, sensing the charged atmosphere between the two women. "I should probably head out," he said, starting to rise. "Stay." Sarah said, her voice quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of command. "If you're already involved, leaving won't make you safer." Eddie slowly sank back onto his stool. "Involved in what exactly?" Sarah turned to Rose. "How long have you known?" Rose moved behind the counter, pouring 3 cups of coffee. Her movements were precise and economical. Nothing like the homey, slightly scattered motions of the diner owner she pretended to be. "From the beginning," she admitted. 8 years ago, when you first rolled in with that custom rig, I knew exactly who you were and why you were here." "Budapest," Sarah said, the word falling between them like a stone. Rose nodded, sliding a cup towards Sarah. "I was your handler on that operation, though we never met face to face. After what happened there, after what was done to you and your team, I couldn't stay with the agency anymore. Yet here you are 8 years later, running a diner directly in the path of my deep cover assignment." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "That's quite a coincidence." "No coincidence," Rose replied evenly. "I specifically requested this location when I needed to disappear. I knew Operation Serpentine would eventually lead here." "Hold on," Eddie interrupted, standing now. "You're saying you two know each other, that you're—" "What spies?" His face wavered between disbelief and dawning comprehension as he looked at Sarah. "That would explain how you just took down 8 armed men single-handedly." Sarah turned to him. "Eddie, what you saw tonight can never leave this room, for your own safety." Eddie's face hardened. "Those Road Kings bastards killed Mike Delgado, left his kids fatherless. I'm not about to protect them." "This goes far beyond the Road Kings," Sarah replied. "What you witnessed tonight is just the surface of something much larger and more dangerous." Rose placed a weathered hand on Eddie's arm. Trust me when I say that knowing too much about this will put a target on your back. One that won't go away. Eddie studied both women for a long moment before nodding slowly. Mike was my friend for 15 years. If you're going after the people responsible, I want to help. Sarah exchanged a glance with Rose, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. We may need someone with your knowledge of the trucking routes and community, Sarah conceded. But for now, I need information. She turned back to Rose. You said you knew Operation Serpentine would lead here. What else do you know? Rose moved to a seemingly ordinary cabinet behind the counter. She entered a code on a hidden keypad, and the false back swung open to reveal a small, sophisticated communications center satellite uplink encrypted computer weapons cache. I've been monitoring Road King's activities for the past 3 years, she said, activating the computer system. Their expansion isn't random. They're establishing a corridor. A map appeared on the screen showing a network of routes from the Mexican border up through Arizona, Nevada, and into the Pacific Northwest. The weapons shipments follow a very specific pattern. Sarah studied the map, her tactical mind immediately recognizing the implications. They're creating a pipeline, but not just for weapons. These routes connect major military installations and research facilities. Eddie leaned forward, his trucker's knowledge proving useful. Those northern routes, they're rarely patrolled, remote terrain, bad weather half the year, perfect for moving cargo undetected. Rose nodded. Exactly. But the question remains, what's the end game? And who's the Department of Defense contact Victor mentioned? Sarah's eyes narrowed. You heard that. Rose tapped her ear discreetly. Your jacket has a built-in transmitter, standard Atlas protocol for handlers to monitor field agents. Former handlers, Sarah corrected sharply. I've been off the grid for 3 years. Have you? Rose asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Sarah felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. You've been reporting on me this whole time. Not reporting, Rose corrected, protecting. After Budapest, I couldn't trust the agency anymore. But I couldn't walk away completely, not when I knew what was really going on. And what exactly is going on? Sarah demanded. Rose looked at her steadily. Operation Serpentine wasn't about drug trafficking or weapons smuggling. Those were just covers. The real target was you, Sarah, from the very beginning. This was the second major twist, the revelation that Sarah had been manipulated from the start and that her entire mission had been a setup. Sarah went utterly still, only the slight narrowing of her eyes betraying her shock. Explain. Rose pulled up a classified file on her computer. After Budapest, you became something of a legend within Atlas. The only operative to survive an operation gone catastrophically wrong. Your skill set, your psychological profile, you were unique. Too valuable to lose, too dangerous to control. So they put me on ice, Sarah said, understanding dawning. A deep cover assignment with no end date, somewhere I couldn't cause trouble. But they needed to keep tabs on you, Rose continued. So they created Victor Ramirez's entire operation specifically to keep you occupied, a puzzle complex enough to challenge you, but contained enough to prevent you from looking elsewhere. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to the scar along her collarbone. Who authorized this? That's what I've been trying to discover. Rose pulled up another file, a heavily redacted Atlas document with only a few visible signatures. The authorization came from the highest levels, someone codenamed Patriarch. Eddie, who had been following the conversation with growing unease, finally spoke up. So the Road Kings, the weapons, the hijackings, all of it was just to keep you busy? People died. Sarah's expression darkened. Collateral damage has never bothered certain elements within the intelligence community. She turned back to Rose. But something changed. Victor mentioned Arlington Department of Defense. That's not part of the containment strategy. Rose nodded grimly. 3 months ago, I detected a shift in the pattern. New players entered the game. The Road Kings began moving more than just weapons. They were transporting specialized equipment, military-grade electronics, biological containment units. For what purpose? Sarah asked. I don't know, Rose admitted. But whatever it is, it spooked Victor enough that he accelerated his timeline and expanded operations before he was ready. That's why he's been sloppy lately, the failed hijackings, the pressure on local businesses. He's desperate. Sarah processed this information with the rapid analytical skill that had made her Atlas's top operative. So either Victor went rogue from his Atlas handlers, or someone else has taken control of his operation for another purpose. I believe it's the latter, Rose said, and I think it has something to do with this. She pulled up a satellite image of a remote desert facility surrounded by security fencing. This appeared 2 months ago on reservation land near Beaver Dam. Officially, it's a private research station studying desert ecosystems. Unofficially, it's a black site. Sarah finished, recognizing the telltale signs of a covert installation. Military-grade security, but no military presence. Unmarked vehicles. Power consumption inconsistent with its cover story. Eddie looked at the image with growing alarm. That's right in the middle of the route where truckers have been disappearing. Sarah stood suddenly. We need to move. Now, if Victor gave up this much information to me, his handlers will already know something's wrong. They'll be looking to clean house. As if on cue, Rose's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. She checked it, her expression grim. Local police just found the road kings at the checkpoint. All 8 are dead. Single shots to the head, execution style. Sarah's jaw tightened. They're eliminating loose ends. Which means we're next on the list, Rose said, already moving to a cabinet where she retrieved 3 go bags. I've maintained escape protocols since you arrived. Vehicle 2 miles south, supplies for 3 days, clean identities. Eddie looked between them in shock. Wait, all 8 men are dead, but you left them alive. Welcome to the shadow world, Eddie, Sarah said grimly, checking the Glock that Rose handed her. Where inconvenient witnesses don't stay breathing for long. Rose handed Eddie a bulletproof vest. Put this on. You're with us now, whether you like it or not. The big trucker took the vest with shaking hands. I just haul freight, lady. I'm not cut out for whatever this is. You know the back roads better than either of us, Sarah told him. And right now, staying alive means staying off the grid. She turned to Rose. How long until they trace your communication systems? Minutes, maybe less, Rose replied, already wiping the computer drives. They'll send a cleanup team to the diner first. Standard procedure. Sarah nodded. Then we need to leave them a message. While Rose finished gathering essential equipment and Eddie struggled into his vest, Sarah moved through the diner with purpose. From her jacket, she removed several small devices, motion sensors, and miniature cameras, placing them strategically throughout the building. Finally, she took a salt shaker from a table and carefully emptied it before inserting a small metallic cylinder. What's that? Eddie asked nervously. Insurance, Sarah replied, placing the salt shaker back on the table in a precise position. If they follow standard wetwork protocols, they'll sweep for electronics, but ignore everyday items. Rose emerged from the back room with 3 backpacks. Escape tunnel leads to the old storm drain. We can access the emergency vehicle from there. Sarah nodded. One last thing. She moved to the diner's landline phone and dialed a number from memory. When the automated system answered, she entered a long code sequence followed by the words Nightingale, Protocol Black, Budapest Contingency. She hung up and turned to the others. That will buy us some time. What did you just do? Eddie asked as they moved toward the back of the diner. I just officially died, Sarah replied grimly, along with anyone associated with me. Rose led them through the kitchen to a walk-in freezer. At the back, behind stacked boxes of supplies, a hidden door revealed a narrow passage. Old Cold War relic, she explained as they entered the dimly lit tunnel. This whole area was a fallout shelter network in the 1960s. They moved quickly through the passage, the air growing cooler and damper as they descended. After several minutes, they reached a junction where the tunnel opened into a larger concrete conduit, the storm drain system. Half a mile south, Rose directed, her voice echoing slightly. The access point is beneath an abandoned gas station. As they made their way through the dark tunnel, Eddie broke the tense silence. So you're both some kind of secret agents? Was, Sarah corrected. Atlas is a black ops division that officially doesn't exist. We handled situations too sensitive for conventional intelligence agencies. Like what happened in Budapest, Eddie asked. Sarah's expression hardened. Budapest was supposed to be a simple extraction, a scientist with information vital to national security. Instead, it was a slaughterhouse. Her hand moved unconsciously to her scar. My entire team was killed. The scientist, too. I barely made it out alive. And you think the same people who set you up then are behind what's happening now? Eddie pressed. It's more than that, Rose interjected. Budapest wasn't just a failed operation. It was a test. Sarah stopped abruptly, turning to face Rose. What are you talking about? Rose's expression was grim in the dim light. I've spent years piecing it together. The Budapest operation was deliberately compromised from within. They wanted to see how you would react under extreme conditions, what decisions you would make when everything went wrong. What by all? Sarah demanded. Because they were building something, a program codenamed Phoenix. Elite operatives who could function independently without oversight or support in situations where traditional assets would fail. They needed to identify candidates with specific psychological and physical traits. And I passed their test, Sarah said, her voice flat. With flying colors, Rose confirmed. The way you adapted, improvised, survived, it was exactly what they were looking for. Sarah absorbed this information, her mind racing. So Operation Serpentine wasn't just about keeping me occupied. It was phase 2 of my evaluation. I believe so, Rose nodded. A long-term stress test to see if you could maintain cover and operational effectiveness for years without direct support. Jesus Christ, Eddie muttered. Your own people did this to you. Not my people, Sarah corrected sharply. Not anymore. She turned back to Rose. This facility near Beaver Dam, you think it's connected to Phoenix? It fits the profile, Rose replied. Isolated location, heavy security, unusual supply requirements. The timing of its construction coincides with the shift in Road King's activities. They reached another junction in the tunnel system, this one marked with a faded radiation symbol, a remnant from its Cold War origins. Rose led them down a narrower passage that sloped upward. Almost there, she said. The vehicle is in an underground garage connected to the old gas station. As they climbed, Sarah's tactical mind worked through the implications of what she'd learned. If Rose was right, if the Phoenix program was real, and the facility was connected to it, then the stakes were far higher than a simple weapons smuggling operation. Rose, she said as they approached a metal ladder leading upward, if they were evaluating me all this time, why risk it all now? Why expand the Road King's operation in a way that would inevitably attract attention? Rose paused at the base of the ladder, looking back at Sarah with a grim expression. Because they're ready for the next phase. And if I'm right about what that is, God help us all. They emerged from the tunnel into a dimly lit underground garage. As Rose had promised, a vehicle waited, a heavily modified black Suburban with reinforced bumpers and bulletproof windows. They loaded their equipment into the Suburban. Eddie, still visibly struggling to process everything he'd learned, climbed into the back seat while Rose took the wheel. Sarah settled into the passenger seat, her mind already mapping their next moves. Where are we heading? She asked as Rose started the engine. First, we need to establish whether we're being tracked, Rose replied, guiding the vehicle up a ramp that led out of the garage. Then we need intelligence on who exactly is after us and what their capabilities are. I know someone who might help, Sarah said, an old contact in Flagstaff, former NSA analyst who went off the grid after a disagreement with his superiors. If anyone can hack into the systems we need, it's him. Rose nodded. Flagstaff it is. The Suburban emerged from the underground garage into the desert night. Rose killed the headlights, immediately navigating by moonlight along a barely visible track that led away from the abandoned gas station. In the distance, they could see the glow of emergency vehicles surrounding Rose's diner. Even from this distance, the flashing red and blue lights cast an ominous pall against the night sky. That response time is too fast for local law enforcement, Sarah observed. Someone called in federal resources. Which confirms our suspicions, Rose said grimly. This goes higher than Atlas. Eddie leaned forward from the back seat. Shouldn't we be getting farther away? If they're federal agents, they'll have helicopters, roadblocks. They're not looking for us, Sarah explained. They're looking for 3 bodies. As far as they know, we died in that diner. How can you be sure? Eddie pressed. Because I just triggered a dead man's switch, Sarah replied. The Budapest contingency is a protocol I established years ago. If activated, it releases falsified evidence of my death, DNA samples, dental records, everything needed to convince even the most thorough investigation. As they drove through the darkness, Sarah's burner phone buzzed with an incoming message. She checked it cautiously. Nightingale status deceased. Budapest contingency active. Atlas resources redirected. Safe travel ghost. It worked, she said, showing the message to Rose. We're officially dead. That buys us time, but not much, Rose warned. Once they process the scene and realize there are no bodies, they'll know we survived. By then, we'll be long gone, Sarah assured her. The protocol also triggers a cascade of false sightings across the country. They'll be chasing shadows for days. They drove in silence for several miles following unmarked desert tracks that kept them well away from main roads. The Suburban's specialized suspension handled the rough terrain with ease, its engine barely audible despite their speed. Rose suddenly tensed, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. We've got company. 2 vehicles coming fast. Sarah swiveled in her seat using a night vision monocular to scan the darkness behind them. 2 SUVs with darkened windows were indeed approaching rapidly, their headlights off, navigating the desert terrain with the precision of professional drivers. How did they find us? Eddie asked, panic edging into his voice. They didn't, Sarah replied grimly. They followed standard pursuit protocols, split up, cover all possible escape routes. We got unlucky. Rose accelerated the Suburban's powerful engine, responding instantly. Hold on, she warned as she took them off the track and into the open desert, weaving between scrub brush and rock formations. Eddie, in the back compartment, there's a case marked tactical, Sarah instructed. Open it. Eddie did as told, revealing an arsenal of weapons and equipment. Jesus Christ, he muttered. Give me the M4, Sarah instructed, reaching back. Eddie handed her a compact assault rifle, which she quickly checked and loaded. Rose, we need distance. I need a firing position. Working on it, Rose replied tersely, her hands steady on the wheel as she navigated the increasingly rough terrain. There's a ridge about half a mile ahead, higher ground, good cover. The pursuing vehicles were gaining despite Rose's evasive driving. Sarah could now make out the silhouettes of their pursuers, military-style SUVs with reinforced frames and what appeared to be mounted weapons on their roofs. Not local law enforcement, she observed. These are professional wet work teams. Black Ops, Rose agreed, probably the same ones who cleaned up the Road Kings. She guided the Suburban toward the ridge she'd mentioned, the vehicle bouncing violently as they crossed a dry wash. Behind them, one of the pursuing SUVs hit the same depression too fast, momentarily losing control before recovering. They're good, Sarah noted, but not desert drivers. Rose flashed a grim smile. Let's use that. She abruptly cut the wheel, sending them up a nearly invisible game trail that wound through a boulder field. The maneuver bought them precious seconds as their pursuers were forced to slow down to navigate the treacherous terrain. They crested the ridge Rose had mentioned, and she immediately positioned the Suburban behind a cluster of large rocks, cutting the engine. We make our stand here, she announced. Better defensive position than trying to outrun them. Sarah was already exiting the vehicle, M4 in hand. Eddie, stay down and stay in the vehicle. Rose, take the right flank. I'll take the left. The 2 women moved with practiced efficiency, taking up positions among the rocks. Sarah set up with a clear line of fire down the slope they had just climbed, while Rose positioned herself to cover the other potential approach. The pursuing vehicles had slowed, obviously aware they were driving into a potential ambush. They separated, one circling wide to approach from the east, the other maintaining a direct approach from the south. Smart, Rose commented. Classic pincer movement. Too smart for standard cleanup crews, Sarah replied. These are elite tactical teams. The lead SUV stopped about 300 yards below their position. Its doors remained closed, no one emerging. They're waiting for their flanking team to get in position, Rose observed. Sarah adjusted her aim, switching the M4 selector to single-shot mode. Let's not give them that chance. She squeezed the trigger, sending a single round into the SUV's front tire. The vehicle lurched as the tire blew out. Immediately, its doors flew open and 4 figures in tactical gear deployed, seeking cover among the rocks and scrub. 4-man team standard formation, Sarah noted, firing again to keep them pinned down. The other vehicle will have the same. Rose was tracking the second SUV through her scope. They're about 60 seconds from optimal firing position. We need to move, Sarah decided. They're trying to fix our position. As if to confirm her assessment, a burst of automatic fire ricocheted off the rocks near her head. Sarah ducked, then returned fire in short, controlled bursts, forcing the attackers to keep their heads down. Rose, fall back to the vehicle, she ordered. I'll cover you. Rose hesitated. Sarah. Do it, Sarah insisted. We need to reposition before they can coordinate. Rose nodded and began moving back toward the Suburban. Sarah provided covering fire, alternating her aim between the visible attackers and the approaching second vehicle. A sudden movement caught her eye. One of the tactical team members was circling around trying to flank her position. Sarah tracked him through her sight and fired twice. The figure crumpled to the ground. One down, she reported coolly. Rose reached the Suburban and slid behind the wheel. Sarah began her own retreat, moving from cover to cover, with the fluid grace of someone who had done this many times before. A burst of gunfire kicked up dirt at her feet. Sarah rolled behind a boulder, came up in a crouch, and returned fire. Another attacker went down. "Sarah, move now," Rose called out, the Suburban's engine roaring to life. Sarah broke cover, sprinting the final 20 yards to the vehicle as Rose began to reverse. Bullets pinged off the Suburban's armored body. Sarah dived through the open door as Rose accelerated the vehicle, fishtailing as it backed rapidly away from the ridge. "Everyone okay?" Rose asked, executing a perfect J-turn to reorient the vehicle. "Define okay?" Eddie replied shakily from the back seat where he'd been huddled on the floor. "Who the hell are these people?" "Wet work team," Sarah replied, reloading the M4. "But not standard issue. Their tactics, their equipment, they're too good." "Special Activities Division," Rose suggested, guiding the Suburban down the far side of the ridge away from their pursuers. "Or maybe Delta Force operators contracted for Black Ops work." "Whoever they are, they're persistent," Sarah observed, noting headlights appearing at the top of the ridge behind them. "And they're not giving up." Rose accelerated again, taking them deeper into the desert. "There's an old mining road about 3 miles ahead. If we can reach it, it'll take us to Interstate 40 where we can blend with traffic." "They'll have called for air support by now," Sarah warned. "We've got maybe 15 minutes before they have eyes in the sky. Then we need to disappear before that happens," Rose replied grimly. They raced through the darkness, the Suburban bouncing violently over the uneven terrain. Behind them, their pursuers were gaining again now, free of the boulder field that had slowed them earlier. "We're not going to outrun them," Sarah concluded. "We need another approach." She began rummaging through the tactical case, quickly assembling what looked like a small drone. "Eddie, there's a tablet in that case. Power it up." Eddie did as instructed, handing her the tablet once it was on. Sarah connected it to the drone and began programming a flight path. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Creating a diversion," Sarah replied. "This is a decoy drone equipped with thermal generators. It mimics human heat signatures. If we launch it on a path heading west, it might draw off their air support long enough for us to reach the interstate." "Might," Eddie repeated nervously. "It's better than no plan," Rose said, her eyes still fixed on the road ahead. "The mining road is just ahead." Sarah finished programming the drone. "Ready when you are." Rose nodded, then suddenly braked hard, bringing the Suburban to a brief stop. "Now." Sarah opened her window and launched the drone. It shot into the night sky, rapidly gaining altitude before leveling off and heading west away from their intended escape route. Rose immediately accelerated again, turning onto the barely visible mining road that wound through a narrow canyon. The steep walls would hide them from aerial observation, at least temporarily. "Drone is transmitting," Sarah reported, watching the tablet. "They're getting a clear heat signature reading. Let's hope they take the bait." The mining road was in poor condition, forcing Rose to slow their pace. The jolting ride made conversation difficult, but Eddie leaned forward again, determined to understand what was happening. "So, this Phoenix program," he said, "what exactly is it?" "Some kind of super soldier project." Sarah and Rose exchanged glances. "Not exactly," Rose replied. "From what I've pieced together, it's more about creating perfect deep cover operatives. People who can infiltrate any situation, adapt to any environment, and execute operations without external support or oversight." "Like you," Eddie said to Sarah. "No," she corrected. "What I did was training and experience. What they're trying to create is something else entirely. Operatives with no moral constraints, no psychological limits, and absolute loyalty to their handlers." "How is that even possible?" Eddie asked. "That's what we need to find out," Sarah replied grimly. They eventually reached Interstate 40, where Rose had arranged for a vehicle switch at a storage facility owned by a trusted contact. The F-150 pickup they acquired was nondescript, perfect for blending in with the traffic heading toward Flagstaff. "Your contact in Flagstaff," Rose said as they drove west on the interstate. "I'm assuming it's David Chen." Sarah raised an eyebrow. You know him? I know of him, Rose corrected. Former NSA cryptanalyst who disappeared after blowing the whistle on a domestic surveillance program, rumored to have the best hackware on the black market. That's him, Sarah confirmed. He owes me a favor from a situation in Taiwan a few years back. If anyone can get us into the facility's systems, it's Chen. As they approached the outskirts of Flagstaff, Sarah's instincts prickled a warning. It's too quiet, she observed. Interstate exchange like this should have more traffic even at this hour. Rose nodded, slowing the truck. I see it too. No trucks in the truck stop. No cars at the gas pumps. Trap, Eddie asked nervously. Possibly, Sarah replied, scanning the area through her monocular. Or they've already established a perimeter and cleared the area. Rose made a quick decision, turning the truck onto a side road before they reached the exchange. There's another approach to the city, about 5 miles north. Longer route, but safer. They followed back roads, eventually reaching a long driveway marked by a weather-beaten sign reading Carson Ranch. Rose turned in, following the dirt track that wound through a grove of cottonwood trees before opening onto a modest ranch house with several outbuildings. A porch light came on as they approached, and a figure appeared in the doorway, an elderly man with a shotgun held casually in the crook of his arm. Rose stopped the truck and flashed the lights in a specific pattern. The man lowered his shotgun and stepped forward. "Company at this hour, Rosie," he called out, his voice carrying a hint of Texas drawl. "Must be serious trouble." "The worst kind, Jack," Rose replied, stepping out of the vehicle. "Need to borrow wheels and ask for discretion." Jack Carson studied the three of them and nodded slowly. "Same folks who came asking questions yesterday." Rose tensed. "What folks?" "Government types, showed credentials, asked if I'd seen any unusual traffic." Jack spat on the ground. "Told them the only unusual traffic round here was them. They didn't much like that answer." Sarah and Rose exchanged glances. "How long ago?" Sarah asked. "About 18 hours, Jack replied. "Left a card, said to call if I saw anything suspicious." He chuckled dryly. "Been ranching here 40 years. Government men are the most suspicious things I ever see." "Jack, we need a vehicle that can't be traced," Rose said urgently, "and we were never here." Jack nodded toward one of the outbuildings. "Got an old F-150 in the barn. Nothing fancy, but it runs good and the papers are clean. Was my brother's before he passed." While Rose and Jack sorted out the vehicle exchange, Sarah took Eddie aside. "Last chance to walk away," she told him quietly. "Jack can get you to a bus station. You can disappear, start fresh somewhere." Eddie looked at her with surprising resolve. "They killed Mike, left his kids without a father. I'm seeing this through." Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Once we reach Flagstaff, things get even more dangerous. I need to know you can handle yourself." "I hauled freight through Sarajevo during the war," Eddie replied. "Drove convoys in Iraq as a contractor. I'm not as helpless as I look." Sarah's estimation of the trucker rose several notches. Good to know. They transferred their essential equipment to Jack's F-150 and continued toward Flagstaff, taking back roads to avoid potential checkpoints. Sarah's burner phone buzzed with an incoming message. Multiple teams deployed. Primary target Nightingale. Secondary targets all associated personnel. Shoot on site, authorization confirmed. "They figured it out," she said grimly, showing the message to Rose. "The Budapest contingency has been compromised." "How?" Rose demanded. "That protocol was foolproof." "Someone on the inside," Sarah concluded. "Someone who knew about the contingency and how to recognize it." "Which means we're blown," Rose said, her knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. "They'll be waiting for us in Flagstaff." Sarah thought quickly, weighing their options. "We need to change the approach. No bookstore, no established contact points. We go direct to Chen's emergency backup location." "Which is?" Rose asked. "An old observatory outside of town," Sarah replied. "Abandoned decades ago, but Chen converted part of it into a secure communications hub. It's completely off-grid, solar power satellite uplink the works." Rose nodded, already adjusting their route. "How do we get there without being spotted?" "We don't go into Flagstaff at all," Sarah decided. "There's a Forest Service road that leads directly to the observatory from the east. It's barely maintained but passable in a truck like this." As they rounded a bend in the road, the trees opened up to reveal a clearing atop a ridge. Silhouetted against the night sky was the distinctive dome of an observatory, its once white surface now weathered and gray. Rose killed the headlights and coasted the final 100 yards, bringing the truck to a stop in the shadow of a small maintenance building adjacent to the main observatory structure. No lights, no signs of activity, she observed. You sure he's here? No, Sarah admitted, but if he's maintaining his usual patterns, this is where he'd come to ground when threatened. They exited the vehicle cautiously, Sarah taking point with her Glock drawn. The night air was cool at this elevation, carrying the scent of pine and the distant lights of Flagstaff spread out in the valley below. Sarah approached the main entrance to the observatory, noting the apparently deteriorated condition of the structure, peeling paint-broken windows, damaged roof tiles. But her trained eye also caught the subtle signs of occupation, recently disturbed gravel, near the door, a nearly invisible security camera tucked into the eaves, the faint hum of electronics that shouldn't be present in an abandoned building. She stopped several paces from the door and spoke clearly. Taiwan 2019, the favor is due. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then with a soft click, the door unlocked itself. Sarah gestured for Rose and Eddie to follow her inside. The interior of the observatory was dark, but as the door closed behind them, recessed lighting activated, revealing a space that bore little resemblance to the decrepit exterior. The central chamber had been converted into a high-tech operations center with multiple workstations surrounding a central server hub. Monitors displayed scrolling data, satellite imagery, and what appeared to be surveillance feeds from various locations. "You're supposed to be dead," came a voice from the shadows. A slight Asian man in his early 40s emerged, his expression a mixture of concern and irritation. "All three of you. I've been monitoring the chatter. Atlas, FBI, Homeland Security, they're all looking for your bodies." "Hello to you too, Chen," Sarah replied, holstering her weapon. "We need your help." David Chen studied the three of them, his gaze lingering on Eddie with obvious curiosity before returning to Sarah. "The last time you needed my help, people tried to kill me." "People are already trying to kill us," Rose interjected, "and they'll kill you too if they discover you're aiding us." Chen sighed, moving to one of the workstations. "What do you need information on a facility near Beaver Dam?" Sarah replied. "Recently constructed, heavy security, possible connection to a program codenamed Phoenix." Chen's fingers froze above his keyboard. "Phoenix, you're sure about that name?" Sarah and Rose exchanged glances. "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "You've heard of it." Chen's expression darkened. "Heard of it. I helped build part of its infrastructure before I realized what it was really for." He turned to face them fully. "If Phoenix is involved, you're not just being hunted by Atlas. You're being hunted by something much worse." "What do you mean?" Sarah demanded. Chen's voice dropped almost to a whisper, as if afraid of being overheard, despite the security of his own facility. "Phoenix isn't just a program to create deep cover operatives. It's a complete restructuring of American intelligence operations, a shadow government with its own agenda, its own resources, and absolutely no oversight." "That's impossible," Rose objected. "Something that large couldn't remain hidden." "It doesn't hide," Chen replied grimly. "It hides in plain sight, spread across multiple agencies, private contractors, military units. Each component seems legitimate on its own. It's only when you connect the dots that the true picture emerges." "And what is that true picture?" Sarah asked quietly. Chen moved to a secure terminal and began typing rapidly. "Let me show you." The central screen lit up with a complex diagram, a web of connections between government agencies, private corporations, military units, and overseas operations. At the center was a simple designation: Patriarch. "Oh my God," Rose whispered, recognizing the code name from earlier. "This is what I've been able to piece together," Chen explained. "Phoenix is the operational arm of what they call the Continuity Initiative, a program designed to ensure American strategic interests continue regardless of political changes, public opinion, or legal constraints." "A deep state," Eddie said, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. "Much deeper than anyone realizes," Chen confirmed. "And the facility you're asking about, it's one of their conditioning centers." "Conditioning?" Sarah repeated, a chill running down her spine. Chen nodded grimly. "That's where they take candidates, people like you, Sarah, and turn them into something else. Something that isn't entirely human anymore." "What are you talking about?" Rose demanded. Instead of answering directly, Chen pulled up a classified file on the screen. "This is what I found before I went off the grid. The reason I disappeared. The file contained medical protocols, surgical procedures, and pharmaceutical formulations that made little sense to Sarah at first glance. But as she read further, the horrifying truth became clear. They're not just training operatives, she said softly. They're modifying them, physically, neurologically. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Targeted neurochemical adjustments to suppress emotional responses, selective memory manipulation, conditioning protocols that would make the old MK Ultra experiments look like child's play. Creating perfect operatives, Rose murmured. Absolutely loyal, no psychological limits, no moral constraints. And completely deniable, Chen added, because officially they don't exist. Eddie looked between them, his face pale. So the Road Kings, the weapons shipments, all part of the supply chain, Sarah finished for him. The facility needs specialized equipment, chemicals, test subjects. Test subjects, Eddie repeated, horrified. Chen nodded grimly. The missing truckers, the hijackings that went bad. Those weren't accidents or unfortunate casualties. They were acquisitions. This was the third major twist, the revelation that the missing truckers, including Mike Delgado, hadn't just been killed in hijackings gone wrong. They had been deliberately targeted and taken to the facility as test subjects for the Phoenix program's conditioning experiments. Sarah felt a cold rage building inside her, a fury more intense than anything she'd experienced since Budapest. How long has this been going on? Based on the data I've gathered, at least 5 years, Chen replied. But it's accelerated significantly in the last 6 months. Something's changed. They're moving towards some kind of endgame. What kind of endgame? Rose asked. Chen shook his head. That's what I haven't been able to determine. But whatever it is, it's happening soon. Very soon. Sarah moved to the window, looking out at the distant lights of Flagstaff and the dark wilderness beyond. Somewhere out there was the facility where people were being transformed into something inhuman, the culmination of a process that had begun with her own evaluation in Budapest. We need to stop it, she said, finally turning back to face the others. Not just expose it, stop it. Permanently. How? Eddie asked. If this thing is as big as Chen says, we hit them where they're vulnerable, Sarah replied, her voice hardening with resolve. The facility near Beaver Dam. If it's as important as we think it is, destroying it will force them into the open. That's suicide, Chen objected. The security at these places is beyond anything you've encountered before. Not for someone they believe is already dead, Sarah countered. Not for someone who knows their protocols from the inside. Rose studied her with a mixture of concern and admiration. You're talking about infiltrating the facility yourself. Sarah nodded. While you and Chen gather the evidence needed to expose the program to the right people. And who exactly are the right people? Chen asked skeptically. I have a contact, Rose replied. Someone who was there at the beginning of Atlas before it was corrupted. Someone with enough influence to make people listen. Can they be trusted? Sarah asked. As much as anyone can be in this world, Rose answered, but we'll need ironclad evidence, the kind that can't be denied or buried. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to the scar on her collarbone. Then we do what I should have done after Budapest. We burn it all down and disappear for good. Dawn broke over the Flagstaff Mountains as Sarah Blackwood studied the satellite imagery on Chen's main display. The Phoenix facility near Beaver Dam appeared as a sterile collection of buildings surrounded by a double perimeter fence, security towers, and a small airstrip. 3 access points, she noted, pointing to the gates. Heavy surveillance on all approaches. Response teams here and here. Chen nodded, enhancing the image. The main building is where they conduct the procedures. Reinforced construction, biocontainment, protocols, independent power supply. Designed to withstand attack, Rose observed, examining the facility's personnel manifests Chen had hacked. Or contain something dangerous, Sarah added grimly. Eddie joined them at the workstation, looking haggard but determined. Any sign of Mike? Chen brought up a personnel roster with security classifications. No direct mention, but there's a designation for research subjects. They're only identified by numbers. How many? Eddie's voice tightened. 23 currently in the facility. Another 14 listed as processed. Sarah turned away, moving to the observatory's main window. The morning light illuminated her face, highlighting the cold determination in her eyes. We move tonight, she announced. Chen, what's the status on those credentials? Almost finished, the former NSA analyst replied, gesturing to a workstation where a printer was producing security badges. These will get you through the outer perimeter checks, but they won't hold up to deep scrutiny. You'll have maybe 30 minutes before the system flags the irregularities. 30 minutes is enough, Sarah said. Rose, your contact. Are they ready to move when we give the signal? Rose nodded, holding a secure satellite phone. One call and they mobilize. But they'll need rock-solid evidence of what's happening in there. They'll get their evidence, Sarah promised, checking her equipment, a suppressed pistol, specialized tools for bypassing security systems, a comm unit, and a modified smartphone with Chen's infiltration software. You're really going in alone? Eddie asked. It's the only way, Sarah replied. A team would be detected. One person, especially someone they believe is dead, has a chance. A small chance, Chen cautioned. Better odds than Budapest, Sarah countered with a grim half-smile. And I walked out of that one. Barely, Rose reminded her softly. Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to the scar along her collarbone. I learned from my mistakes. Chen cleared his throat. There's something else you should know. He pulled up another file, a personnel record with a familiar face. Sarah stared at the image. Victor. Not exactly, Chen corrected. Colonel Victor Ramirez, United States Army Special Forces, officially KIA, in Afghanistan 5 years ago. In reality, reassigned to Phoenix as a field commander. He wasn't just a criminal asset, Sarah realized. He was military all along. A soldier following orders, Rose added. Creating the Road Kings operation was his assignment, building the supply chain for the Phoenix program while keeping you occupied. Who does he report to, Sarah asked. Who's giving these orders? Chen hesitated. That's where things get murky. The operational authority traces back to a joint task force with representatives from military intelligence CIA and a private contractor called Prometheus Consulting. And at the top, Sarah pressed, a single authorization signature. Chen replied, bringing up a heavily redacted document. Codename Patriarch. Sarah turned back to her equipment. Patriarch's identity is secondary. Our primary objective is shutting down that facility and gathering enough evidence to expose the entire program. And if Patriarch has contingencies in place, Rose asked, then we trigger a cascade failure, Sarah replied with cold determination. We don't just expose one facility, we expose the entire network. Chen, your data on the Phoenix infrastructure, how comprehensive is it? Chen moved to another workstation. I've identified 7 facilities domestically, 3 overseas. Communication protocols, supply chains, financing mechanisms. Not complete, but substantial. And you can release all of it simultaneously if necessary. Chen nodded grimly. One command, and it goes to every major news outlet, Congressional Oversight Committee, and Foreign Intelligence Service that might have an interest. The nuclear option, Rose commented. Precisely, Sarah agreed. If we fail, or if they come after us afterward, Chen releases everything. Eddie spoke up. And the people being held there, the test subjects? Sarah met his gaze directly. Freeing them is part of the mission. I'm not leaving anyone behind if they're still alive. The big trucker nodded. Then I'm going with you. Absolutely not, Sarah replied immediately. I know the faces, Eddie interrupted. Mike Delgado, Frank Winters, Sophia Reyes, all the drivers who've disappeared. I can identify them. You can't. Rose placed a hand on Sarah's arm. He has a point. If some of these people have been subjected to the conditioning protocols, they might not be in any state to identify themselves. Sarah studied Eddie's determined expression. She saw something there beyond concern, a steely resolve that reminded her of soldiers she'd served with. You said you drove convoys in Iraq, she asked. Eddie nodded. 2 tours as a contractor. Route Tampa, the highway of death. Lost 3 trucks and 4 friends. I know what I'm getting into. You follow my lead, she said finally. You stay behind me, do exactly what I say when I say it. No heroics, no improvisations. Understood. Understood, Eddie agreed solemnly. By late afternoon, the plan was set. Chen had identified a maintenance shift change at 2200 hours that would create a brief window at the eastern access point. Rose had prepared credentials identifying Sarah and Eddie as technical consultants from Prometheus Consulting. As sunset approached, Sarah separated herself from the group, finding a quiet corner to prepare mentally. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, breathing steady and deep, a pre-mission ritual from her earliest days with Atlas. Rose found her there an hour later. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We could find another way." Sarah opened her eyes. "There is no other way. You know that as well as I do." "I know," Rose admitted, sitting down beside her. "But I feel responsible. I was your handler on Budapest. I should have seen the signs, realized it was a setup." "We were all used," Sarah replied. "You, me, the entire team." "Yes, but you were the one who paid the price." Rose's voice was heavy with regret. "I've spent years trying to make it right." "Is that why you took this assignment, watching over me at the diner?" Rose nodded. "Partly, but also because I knew something wasn't right about Operation Serpentine from the beginning. When I started digging, I found threads connecting back to Budapest, and I knew I had to stay close. All these years I thought I was alone out there." "You were never alone," Rose replied softly. "Completely. When this is over, if we survive, what then?" Oates managed a small smile. "I make a pretty good apple pie. The diner could use another pair of hands." Sarah surprised herself with a short laugh. "I'm not exactly the waitress type." "Neither was I," Rose reminded her. "But we adapt. We survive. That's what we were trained to do." Their moment was interrupted by Chen calling from the main room. "Satellite feed is live. You should see this." They returned to the operations center where Chen had the main screen displaying a real-time view of the Phoenix facility. A convoy of black SUVs was entering through the main gate. "That's not normal," Chen noted. "No VIP visits planned for today." Sarah studied the vehicles. "Can you enhance the lead SUV?" Chen zoomed in on the first vehicle. As the resolution improved, they could make out a distinguished-looking man in his 70s, silver-haired, wearing a dark suit. Rose inhaled sharply. "It can't be." "You know him?" Sarah asked. "Director Marshal Hayes," Rosa replied, her voice tight with disbelief. "Former head of Atlas Operations. Forced into retirement 5 years ago after a congressional inquiry into certain unauthorized activities." "Could he be Patriarch?" Eddie asked. Rose shook her head slowly. "Hayes was powerful, but he always answered to someone else. He was an executor, not an architect." "Then why is he at the facility now?" Sarah wondered aloud. Chen was scanning communication intercepts. "Unknown, but there's been a significant spike in activity within the Phoenix network in the last few hours. Something's happening." "They're accelerating their timeline," Sarah concluded. "Whatever their endgame is, it's happening now." "We need to abort," Rose said immediately. "With Hayes there, security will be at maximum." "Or it's exactly the opportunity we need," Sarah countered. "Hayes being there means something critical is occurring. We might be able to gather intelligence on not just the facility, but the entire program's objectives." "It's suicide," Rose objected. "It's necessity," Sarah replied firmly. "If we back off, we may never get another chance." Rose recognized Sarah was right. The presence of someone as senior as Hayes signaled a critical juncture. "Then we adjust the plan. You can't go in through the east gate now. They'll have enhanced security on all access points." "The airstrip," Sarah said, pointing to the small landing pad at the northern edge. "They'll be focused on securing the main building for Hayes. The peripheral areas might have reduced coverage." Chen checked the surveillance feeds. "She's right. They've pulled personnel from the perimeter to reinforce the main building." "How do we get to the airstrip without being detected?" Eddie asked. Sarah turned to Chen. "You mentioned supply deliveries. What's the schedule?" Chen pulled up the logistics data. "Daily supply run arrives at 2100 hours. Food, medical supplies, general provisions." "From where?" "Central Depot in Kingman," Chen replied. "Contracted through a shell company called Mesa Logistics." "Can you access their system? Get the delivery manifest?" Chen's fingers flew over his keyboard. "Already in. Today's delivery includes standard provisions plus, interesting, medical supplies for the lowest sublevel. Specifically, a shipment of sedatives and specialized restraint equipment." Sarah's expression hardened. "They're preparing for something. We go in with the supply delivery. The truck will have authorization to approach the airstrip service entrance." "And how exactly do we get on this truck?" Rose asked skeptically. "We intercept it," Sarah replied. Standard interdiction protocol, isolated stretch of road, minimal witnesses, quick driver replacement. You mean hijack it? Eddie said. Temporarily borrow it. Sarah corrected. The driver won't be harmed. The plan rapidly evolved. Chen identified the most suitable interception point, a stretch of highway 20 miles from the facility. Sarah and Eddie would take Jack Carson's F-150, intercept the truck, present themselves as Prometheus security consultants, conducting a spot check, and then escort the truck. Once at the facility, they would use the delivery as cover to enter the main building. As the hour of departure approached, Sarah changed into the outfit Chen had prepared, dark tactical pants, a button-down shirt bearing the Prometheus Consulting logo, and a lightweight jacket that concealed her weapons. Remember, Sarah instructed as they prepared to leave, you're a technical specialist brought in to evaluate environmental systems. Limited eye contact, clip professional responses, defer to me for any security questions. Eddie nodded, his expression serious. I can play the part. Rose approached, handing each of them a small device that resembled a standard memory stick. Emergency beacon. If things go sideways, activate it. It'll transmit your location and a distress signal to both Chen and my contact. 3 hours, Chen reminded them, checking his watch. You need to intercept the truck by 20-30 hours to reach the facility in time for the delivery schedule. Sarah nodded, performing a final check of her equipment. If we're not back or haven't made contact by 200 hours, execute the contingency. Understood, Rose replied solemnly. The desert night enveloped them as they drove away from the observatory. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, studying the route, while Eddie drove with steady focus. Why do you do it? Eddie finally asked, breaking the silence. After everything they did to you, everything they took from you, why keep fighting? Sarah was silent for a long moment. Because someone has to, she said finally. Because if people like me walk away, then people like them win, and the world becomes a darker place. They fell silent as they approached the interception point. Sarah directed Eddie to pull off onto a side road and douse the headlights. They had approximately 15 minutes before the supply truck would pass. When it comes, Sarah instructed, flash your high beams twice, then pull out behind it. Stay close enough to be seen in their mirrors, but not so close as to appear aggressive. Right on schedule, the headlights of a large box truck appeared. Eddie followed Sarah's instructions, flashing his high beams and pulling out behind the truck. For a tense moment, it seemed the truck might ignore them, but then its brake lights illuminated and it gradually slowed. Sarah approached the driver's window with purposeful strides. Prometheus Security, she announced crisply, holding up her credential badge. Unscheduled compliance verification. The driver frowned. I wasn't notified of any security check. That's the point of unscheduled, sir, Sarah replied with corporate condescension. Recent protocol updates require random inspections. Director Hayes has implemented heightened security measures for all facility deliveries. The mention of Hayes convinced the driver. Fine, but make it quick. I'm on a tight schedule. This won't delay your delivery, Sarah assured him. My colleague will ride with you. I'll follow in our vehicle. Eddie climbed into the passenger side of the truck cab, while Sarah returned to the F-150. The small convoy resumed its journey toward the Phoenix facility, Sarah maintaining radio contact with Eddie through their concealed comm units. Approaching outer security perimeter, Eddie's voice came through her earpiece 20 minutes later. Guard post visible ahead. Understood, Sarah replied. Maintain your cover. Let the driver handle the initial interaction. The truck stopped at the checkpoint. The driver presented his credentials, and after a brief inspection, the guard waved the truck through. Sarah waited until the truck had cleared before approaching in the F-150. Prometheus Security, she announced to the guard, presenting her forged credentials. Escorting tonight's delivery as part of Director Hayes' enhanced protocols. The guard examined her credentials carefully, then checked a tablet computer. You're not on my access list. Check again, Sarah suggested calmly. Authorization code Tango 7 Echo 9er, direct from Arlington this afternoon. The guard frowned, returned to his tablet, and tapped in the code Chen had extracted from the facility's security protocols. After a moment, he nodded reluctantly. Verified. Proceed directly to the service entrance. The gate raised and Sarah drove through, maintaining a respectful distance behind the delivery truck as it wound its way toward the facility. In the distance, the low buildings of the Phoenix facility glowed with harsh industrial lighting. First checkpoint cleared, Sarah murmured into her comm. Stay alert. Inner perimeter security will be more thorough. As they approached the facility proper, the security presence intensified. Armed patrols with dogs moved along the inner perimeter fence, and surveillance cameras tracked their approach. The convoy was directed to a dedicated service entrance, a large loading dock area illuminated by powerful floodlights. Sarah parked the F-150 and approached the delivery truck as Eddie and the driver exited the cab. Two security guards were already moving toward them, accompanied by a facility staff member in a white lab coat. Evening, Sarah greeted them professionally. Prometheus Security escorting tonight's delivery per Director Hayes' updated protocols. The staff member, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, examined their credentials. We weren't informed of any security escort. The point of enhanced security is unpredictability, Sarah replied smoothly. We'll need to verify the delivery contents before they're taken inside. Standard procedure now. The man looked skeptical, but eventually nodded. Fine, but be quick about it. We're on a tight schedule tonight. Sarah and Eddie followed the staff member into the loading dock area where the truck was already being unloaded. Large crates and containers were being transferred to carts for distribution throughout the building. What's the rush tonight? Sarah asked casually. Special occasion. The staff member gave her a cold look. That's not your concern. Actually, it is, Sarah countered. Proper security protocols require understanding the context of any accelerated delivery schedule. Potential vulnerabilities increase during rushed operations. The man hesitated, weighing whether to comply to get rid of them faster. Director Hayes is conducting a program review, he finally said. Certain demonstrations are scheduled for tonight. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor while internally processing this information. Demonstrations could only mean one thing: they were going to showcase the results of their conditioning program. I see, she replied. Then we'll need to inspect the sub-level deliveries as well, particularly the medical supplies. That won't be necessary, the man objected. Those areas are restricted. Not to Prometheus Security, Sarah countered, showing her credentials again. Level 7 clearance. Director Hayes was quite specific about comprehensive verification. After a tense standoff, the staff member reluctantly conceded. Fine, but you'll be escorted at all times. A security guard was assigned to accompany them as they followed a cart loaded with medical supplies toward a service elevator. Eddie maintained his role perfectly meticulously, checking items off a list. The elevator descended to the lowest level opening onto a sterile corridor with harsh fluorescent lighting. The air was noticeably cooler, with the faint smell of antiseptic and something medicinal. All deliveries go to central storage, their escort instructed. You can verify the inventory there. Sarah studied their surroundings while appearing to focus on her clipboard. The sub-level was laid out in a grid pattern, with the main corridor branching into smaller hallways. Security cameras covered all intersections, and several doors featured both keycard readers and biometric scanners. Most telling were the red lines painted on the floor's standard containment protocol indicators used in high-security medical facilities. They reached the central storage area, a large room filled with shelving units and refrigerated cabinets. Two technicians were already there unpacking earlier deliveries. We'll need to verify the controlled substances, Sarah announced, moving toward a locked cabinet. Specifically the sedatives and neuromuscular blockers. That cabinet requires special authorization, their escort objected. Sarah produced her credentials again, which I have, unless you'd prefer to call Director Hayes and explain the delay in his schedule. The guard reluctantly opened the cabinet, revealing rows of labeled vials and packages. Sarah made a show of checking the inventory while surreptitiously palming 2 vials of sedative. Everything seems in order, she announced. Now we'll need to verify the deployment stations. Before the guard could object, the facility-wide PA system crackled to life. All medical staff to Preparation Room C. Repeat, all medical staff to Preparation Room C. Demonstration commences in 30 minutes. The announcement created the diversion they needed. Sarah caught Eddie's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. Sarah addressed one of the technicians. Where is Preparation Room C from here? We'll need to verify those supplies immediately if the demonstration is commencing soon. The technician, more concerned with his own tasks than security, gestured vaguely. East Corridor, 3rd intersection, follow the red line. Thank you, Sarah replied. She turned to their guard. Let's proceed. Director Hayes will be expecting everything to be in order. The guard led them toward the east corridor. As they walked, Sarah noted all security features, personnel movements, and potential escape routes. The east corridor was busier with medical staff and security personnel moving purposefully between rooms. What exactly is being demonstrated tonight? Sarah asked conversationally. That's classified, the guard replied curtly. Not to us, Sarah countered. Prometheus oversees all demonstration protocols. The guard hesitated, then decided that revealing general information was easier than resisting. Behavioral compliance demonstration. Subject response to command stimuli. Sarah felt Eddie stiffen beside her. I see. Which subjects are being used? The recent acquisitions or the fully conditioned ones? Both, the guard replied, seemingly relieved to be talking to someone with apparent knowledge. Comparative demonstration of before and after conditioning protocols. They turned a corner and found themselves in a wider corridor with increased activity. Medical staff moved in and out of several rooms, while security personnel stood at attention outside a set of double doors. Preparation room C is there, the guard indicated, but you can't go in during prep. Security protocol. Of course, Sarah agreed smoothly. We'll just verify the supply station here. She gestured to a cabinet mounted on the wall nearby. As the guard relaxed slightly, Sarah made her move. In one fluid motion, she withdrew a specialized injector from her pocket and pressed it against the guard's neck. Before he could react, the device discharged a fast-acting sedative. The guard's eyes widened in shock, then glazed over. Sarah caught him as he slumped forward, making it appear as though she was simply supporting a colleague who had stumbled. Storage closet, she murmured to Eddie, nodding toward a door marked maintenance nearby. Eddie quickly secured the unconscious guard in the closet while Sarah kept watch outside. We have maybe 15 minutes before someone notices he's missing, Sarah whispered. We need to find the detainment area. Eddie nodded grimly. The double doors. That's where they're prepping the subjects. Too many personnel, Sarah cautioned. We need another approach. She scanned the corridor, noting a service passage branching off. There, maintenance access should connect throughout this level. Once inside the narrow maintenance corridor, they were free from surveillance cameras. Sarah consulted her mental map of the facility and led them through the passage until they reached a ventilation access point, a metal grate large enough for a person to pass through. This should lead directly to the sub-level HVAC system, she whispered. From there, we can access any room without using the main corridors. Sarah quickly removed the grate and lowered herself into the shaft below. Clear, she called softly to Eddie. Come down. The big trucker descended less gracefully but managed to fit. Together, they moved through the ventilation system, following Sarah's instinctive understanding of facility design toward where the detention cells would logically be located. At a junction where multiple ventilation shafts converged, Sarah paused to listen. From one of the branches, she could hear voices discussing preparations. Subjects responding well to the new protocol, one voice was saying, especially Subject 17, complete compliance with minimal resistance. And the new acquisitions? Still in initial processing. The trucker from Nevada is proving particularly resilient. Director Hayes wants him included in tonight's demonstration as the before example. Eddie tensed. That has to be Frank Winters, he whispered. He disappeared on the Nevada route 3 weeks ago. They moved toward another branch which sloped slightly downward. Through a grate in the side of the shaft, they saw a sight that confirmed their worst fears. A long corridor lined with cells. Clear-fronted enclosures with medical beds, restraint systems, and monitoring equipment. Most contained occupants wearing identical gray scrubs, many appearing sedated or disoriented. My God, Eddie breathed. It's them. That's Mike Delgado in the third cell, and Sophia Reyes across from him. Sarah quickly assessed the detention area. 2 guards patrolled the corridor, while a medical technician moved from cell to cell, checking monitors and administering injections. We need a diversion, Sarah whispered, something to draw the guards away without triggering a facility-wide alarm. The environmental systems, she decided. If we can trigger a localized environmental alert, something that requires evacuation of this section without suggesting an external breach. Fire suppression system, Sarah explained. If we can activate it in a nearby section protocol, would require moving the detainees to a secondary secure location. During transport is our best opportunity. They retraced their route to find an environmental control station. Sarah quickly identified the fire suppression controls for the section adjacent to the detention area. This will trigger a localized response, she explained as she worked. Standard protocol would be to evacuate adjacent areas as a precaution, especially areas with non-mobile occupants. Sarah bypassed the safety protocols and programmed a thermal anomaly into the system. Immediately, alarms began to sound, not the facility-wide emergency alert, but a localized warning. Now, Sarah said, already moving back toward the detention area. We need to get back before they start the evacuation. They returned to the grate overlooking the detention corridor just as facility staff began responding to the alarm. Medical personnel were entering the area preparing the detainees for transport. Beginning emergency relocation protocol, a voice announced. All detention staff prepare subjects for immediate transfer to secondary containment. Through the grate, they watched as the cell doors were opened one by one and the occupants were transferred to gurneys for transport. Now we need to get ahead of them, Sarah whispered. The transport route will take them through the east corridor to the secondary containment area. They moved quickly through the ventilation system, following a path that would intercept the evacuation route. They reached another access point opening into a small supply room adjacent to the main corridor. Sarah listened for the approaching sounds of the evacuation wheels on linoleum voices, giving instructions. Ready? She asked Eddie, her hand on the grate fasteners. The big trucker nodded grimly. Sarah removed the grate and dropped silently into the supply room. Eddie followed, and they positioned themselves on either side of the door. Through the small window, Sarah could see the evacuation procession approaching, medical staff pushing gurneys with restrained detainees flanked by security personnel. She counted quickly: 12 detainees, 4 medical staff, 3 security guards. Wait for my signal, she whispered. When I move, target the rear guard. Sedative injection to the neck. Don't hesitate. As the procession passed their position, Sarah waited for the optimal moment. The lead elements had already moved beyond their door when she gave the signal. They burst from the supply room in perfect synchronization, Sarah taking the 2 guards at the center, while Eddie targeted the rear guard. The specialized injectors delivered their sedative payload, instantly dropping all 3 security personnel before they could react. The medical staff froze in shock. Sarah drew her suppressed pistol and aimed it with unwavering precision. Nobody moves, she ordered coldly. Hands where I can see them. The staff complied, immediately raising their hands. Eddie, check the detainees, Sarah instructed, keeping her weapon trained on the medical personnel. Identify anyone you recognize. Eddie moved quickly from gurney to gurney. Mike Delgado, he confirmed. Frank Winters, Sophia Reyes. Jesus, they're all here. Are they conscious? Can they move under their own power? Sarah asked. Eddie found Mike Delgado semi-conscious but responsive. They're drugged but awake, might be able to walk with support. Good enough, Sarah decided. We're getting them out of here, now. One of the medical staff, a woman with a supervisor's badge, found her voice. You can't do this. You don't understand what's happening here. I understand perfectly, Sarah replied coldly. Human experimentation, involuntary conditioning, violation of every ethical and legal standard in existence. It's more complicated than that, the woman insisted. These people are part of something important, something necessary for national security. Save it, Sarah cut her off. Eddie, start releasing the restraints. We're taking them all. Eddie began helping Mike Delgado to sit up. Easy, Mike, it's me, Eddie. We're getting you out of here. Mike blinked in confusion. Eddie, what? Where am I? Safe now, Eddie assured him, moving to the next gurney. Sarah maintained her position, weapon still trained on the staff. You 3 are going to help us. You'll escort these people out as if this were a normal evacuation. Any deviation, any attempt to signal for help, and you won't live to regret it. Understood. The medical staff nodded fearfully. Eddie, how many can walk? She asked. Maybe half, Eddie reported. The rest are too sedated, or something's been done to them. They're not responding normally. This was the 4th twist, Sarah's realization that they couldn't save everyone through stealth alone. They would need to expose the entire facility publicly, regardless of the consequences. Eddie, get those who can walk moving. Head for the service elevator we used to enter. I'll join you in 5 minutes. What are you going to do? Eddie asked. Create a distraction that can't be ignored, Sarah replied grimly. Something not even Director Hayes can contain. 5 minutes, then we're coming back for you. No, Sarah said firmly. If I'm not there in 5 minutes, you get these people out. That's the mission. Eddie reluctantly agreed. Understood. Sarah directed Eddie to take 6 of the detainees who could walk, including Mike Delgado and Sofia Reyes, while she marched the medical staff in the opposite direction toward the main research area. Her destination was specific, the Central Research Laboratory, where, according to Chen's files, the core of the Phoenix conditioning program was housed. Where are you taking us? The senior staff member demanded. To meet Director Hayes, Sarah replied coolly. I believe he'll want to hear what I have to say. They reached a security checkpoint with reinforced doors, biometric scanners, and armed guards. Sarah had anticipated this obstacle. Swipe your access card, she instructed the senior staff member, keeping her weapon concealed but pressed against the woman's back. I can't authorize access for unauthorized personnel, the woman objected. You're not, Sarah countered. You're responding to an urgent situation in the research lab, a potential contamination event requiring immediate medical intervention. With a resigned expression, the woman approached the checkpoint. Medical emergency in Lab 1, she announced to the guards. Possible exposure event. We need immediate access. The guards looked skeptical but responded to the apparent urgency. One checked her credentials while the other verified her biometric signature. After a tense moment, they stepped aside. Beyond the security checkpoint lay the heart of the Phoenix facility, a large laboratory filled with advanced medical equipment, monitoring stations, and specialized conditioning chambers. Several technicians moved between workstations, while a group of figures in suits observed from a raised platform. Among them was Director Marshall Hayes. Sarah surveyed the room quickly, identifying the central server banks that would contain the complete records of the Phoenix program. That was her primary target. Move toward the main research stations, she instructed her guides. Act natural until we reach the central platform. As they approached the central area, one of the suited figures noticed them and frowned. He leaned toward Hayes, who turned and looked directly at their group. Sarah knew the moment Hayes recognized her. His expression shifted from mild curiosity to shock, then rapidly to cold calculation. Nightingale, he greeted her, his voice carrying across the laboratory. Or should I say Sarah Blackwood? This is unexpected. We were informed you were deceased. Sarah stepped forward, allowing her hostages to move aside. Reports of my death were premature, Director Hayes. Hayes made a subtle gesture, and the laboratory staff began withdrawing, leaving a clear space around them. Security personnel maintained their positions with weapons ready. May I ask what brings you to our facility? I don't recall issuing an invitation. Consider it a professional courtesy, Sarah replied, matching his calm tone. I wanted to see for myself what Phoenix had become, what you had become. Hayes studied her with detached interest. Always the exemplary operative. This is precisely why you were our most promising candidate. The determination, the resourcefulness, the sheer will to survive against all odds. I was never your candidate, Sarah countered. I was an Atlas field agent, not a lab rat for your experiments. You were always more than that, Hayes corrected. From the beginning, you showed potential far beyond conventional operatives. Budapest merely confirmed what we already suspected, that you possess the psychological and physical attributes necessary for the next evolution of field operations. Budapest was a slaughterhouse, Sarah said, her voice hardening. My entire team died because you wanted to test a theory. Hayes didn't deny it. Sacrifices were necessary. The Phoenix program couldn't be built on theories and simulations. We needed empirical data on how exceptional operatives perform under extreme conditions. And the truckers, Sarah pressed. The civilians you've been abducting and experimenting on, were they necessary sacrifices too? Test subjects were required, Hayes replied with disturbing equanimity. Individuals with specific neurological and psychological profiles, physical attributes that matched our parameters. The transportation sector provided ideal candidates, people with demonstrated resilience, independence, problem-solving abilities. People who wouldn't be immediately missed. And what exactly are you creating with these test subjects, Director? What is Phoenix really about? Hayes seemed almost pleased by her question. The future of intelligence operations, Nightingale. Prototypes who can function independently for years without support or contact. Who can adapt to any environment, overcome any obstacle, complete any mission, all without the psychological limitations that hamper conventional agents. You mean conscience? Sarah corrected. Morality, humanity. Inefficiencies, Hayes countered. Limitations that compromise operational effectiveness. Phoenix operatives transcend these constraints. They are the perfect instruments of national policy, utterly loyal, completely adaptable, and totally deniable. They're people you've tortured and brainwashed, Sarah said, her disgust evident. Hayes sighed as if disappointed. This is why you were perfect for initial observation, but ultimately unsuitable for full Phoenix integration. You cling to outdated concepts of individual rights, personal agency. The greater good requires moving beyond such limitations. The greater good, Sarah repeated. Is that what you call this kidnapping American citizens, human experimentation, creating programmable assassins? Creating the assets necessary to maintain American strategic interests in an increasingly complex global environment, Hayes corrected. Patriarch understood this necessity decades ago. Everything we've built here stems from that vision. Patriarch, Sarah said. The mysterious figure behind it all. I'm guessing he's here tonight for your demonstration. Something flickered in Hayes's expression. Patriarch prefers to observe results rather than processes. But yes, our progress will be evaluated tonight. Sarah glanced around the laboratory, noting the positions of security personnel and the architecture of the central server systems. Everything she needed was here, evidence of the program, proof of its activities, the identities of those involved. I'd like to meet Patriarch, she said, the man who authorized Budapest, the man who decided my team was expendable. Hayes studied her with renewed calculation. What is your actual objective here, Nightingale? You must realize you cannot leave this facility. Whatever you hope to accomplish, it ends here. Does it? Sarah asked, reaching slowly into her pocket. I think you are forgetting something important about me, Director. Something Budapest should have taught you. Oh, and what is that? Hayes asked, gesturing subtly to his security team. Sarah withdrew not a weapon, but the small device Rose had given her, the emergency beacon that would transmit her location and a distress signal. But it was more than that, as Chen had modified it. I never work alone, Sarah replied, activating the device with a simple press of her thumb. The effect was immediate, but not what Hayes had expected. Rather than an assault team breaching the facility, the laboratory's own systems responded. Screens throughout the room flickered, then displayed a single message, transmission active. Hayes's eyes widened in genuine alarm. What have you done? Created transparency, Sarah replied calmly. Every file, every record, every piece of data in your systems is being transmitted to multiple secure locations. The complete history of Project Phoenix, its origins, its methods, its victims, and most importantly, its leadership. Hayes lunged for the device, but Sarah was faster, tossing it across the room, where it slid beneath a server bank still transmitting. Security personnel rushed forward, weapons raised, but it was already too late. Shut it down, Hayes shouted. Cut all external connections now. Throughout the facility, alarms began to sound as security protocols were triggered by the massive data breach. Emergency lights flashed and automated lockdown procedures initiated. In the confusion, Sarah made her move. She darted behind a nearby equipment station as security opened fire bullets, shattering monitors and equipment. Using the laboratory's complex layout to her advantage, she moved from cover to cover, working her way toward the exit. Hayes was shouting orders, trying to regain control, but the carefully orchestrated security was unraveling. The surveillance systems designed to contain threats were now compromised, creating blind spots that hampered the response. Sarah reached a maintenance access point she had identified during her initial survey. As she slipped through it, she heard Hayes's voice rise above the chaos. Find her and initiate scorched earth protocols. Nothing can remain. Hayes was preparing to destroy the facility rather than allow its secrets to be exposed. Sarah had anticipated this. It was why the data transmission had been her primary objective. Even if they destroyed the physical evidence, the digital trail was already beyond their reach. Sarah moved rapidly through the maintenance quarters toward the service elevator, where Eddie should be waiting with the rescued detainees. The facility's alarms continued to blare, and she could hear security teams mobilizing throughout the building. She reached the service area just as Eddie emerged from the elevator with his group of dazed but mobile former captives. We need to move, Sarah told him without preamble. Hayes has initiated destruction protocols. This place is going to be sanitized probably within minutes. Eddie nodded grimly. Truck's waiting at the loading dock. I got these 6 out, but the others. We've done what we can, Sarah assured him. The evidence is what matters now. If we can get that to the right people, none of this will have been in vain. They guided the rescued detainees through the service corridors toward the loading dock. The facility's lockdown procedures had sealed many routes, but Sarah's knowledge of security protocols allowed them to bypass the worst obstacles. As they approached the loading area, they encountered a security team. Sarah reacted first, pushing Eddie and the detainees back around a corner as she fired precisely at the lead guard. He went down, clutching his shoulder as his companions took cover and returned fire. Alternative route, Sarah decided immediately. Emergency exit through the vehicle maintenance bay. Or they changed course, moving as quickly as the disoriented detainees could manage. Behind them, alarms took on a new urgency, a pulsing tone that Sarah recognized as an imminent purge warning. They reached the vehicle maintenance bay, a large garage area where the facility's transport vehicles were serviced. Several trucks and SUVs were parked in maintenance bays. There, Sarah indicated a roll-up door at the far end. Emergency exit should open automatically during purge protocols. The door began to rise, emergency lights flashing. But between their position and the exit stood another obstacle, a squad of security personnel establishing a defensive position. Cover, Sarah ordered, directing the group behind a maintenance truck. Without waiting, she circled around to flank the security position. The guards were focused on the main approach, not expecting an attack from the side. Sarah struck with practiced precision, neutralizing 2 guards with well-placed shots before the others realized they were being flanked. In the ensuing confusion, she called to Eddie, "Now go!" Eddie led the detainees in a sprint toward the exit, using the vehicles for partial cover. Sarah provided suppressing fire, preventing the remaining guards from targeting the escaping group effectively. Once Eddie and the detainees had reached the exit, Sarah began her own withdrawal, moving from cover to cover as she backed toward freedom. The remaining security personnel, more concerned with their own survival as the purge countdown continued, offered only token resistance. Sarah reached the exit just as the facility's systems shifted to final purge status, emergency generators shutting down remaining power, redirected to the destruction protocols. The lights flickered and dimmed as she joined Eddie and the rescued detainees outside. "The truck," Eddie said, pointing to where he had positioned their vehicle, the supply truck they had commandeered, now parked at the edge of the facility's perimeter. They ran for it, helping the weakened detainees aboard as the first explosions began to rock the Phoenix facility behind them. Carefully placed charges were destroying key evidence, collapsing structural elements, ensuring nothing useful would remain for investigators. Sarah took the wheel, Eddie beside her in the passenger seat, the rescued detainees secured in the cargo area. As she accelerated away from the disintegrating facility, she activated the final communication device, the secure link to Rose and Chen. "Package secured," she reported tersely. 6 recovered. Facility compromising. Data transmission confirmed. Rose's voice came through clearly. "Transmission received and distributed. Multiple secure locations. Untraceable. You're clear to proceed to extraction point." Sarah felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The mission's primary objective had been accomplished. The evidence was out beyond the reach of Hayes, beyond the reach of the mysterious patriarch, beyond the reach of anyone who might try to bury the truth about Phoenix. As they drove through the desert night, putting distance between themselves and the burning facility, Eddie asked the question that had been building, "What happens now?" Glanced at him briefly before returning her attention to the road. "Now we disappear, all of us, until we're sure the evidence has had its effect." And then Sarah's expression softened slightly, the rigid operational mask giving way to something more human. "Then we rebuild. Help these people recover what was taken from them. Find a way forward." In the rearview mirror, she could see the distant glow of the Phoenix facility burning against the night sky, a pyre for the twisted ambitions it had housed, for the lives it had destroyed, for the perversion of purpose it represented. But in that same mirror, she could also see the faces of those they had rescued, damaged, disoriented, but alive. Among them, Mike Delgado was comforting Sofia Reyes, his arm around her shoulders as she wept quietly against him, human connection persisting despite everything that had been done to break it. "Rose was right," Sarah said softly. "About what?" Eddie asked. "There's always a way back. No matter how far you go into the darkness, there's always a path home." As they drove toward the extraction point, a remote airstrip where Rose would be waiting with transport to a secure location, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since before Budapest Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival against impossible odds, but the quieter, more profound hope of healing, of recovery, of finding a way to live rather than merely exist. The compass at her throat, the one personal item she had maintained throughout her years of deep cover, seemed lighter somehow. Its purpose had always been to guide her home, but until now she hadn't been sure where home was or if it still existed at all. Now she knew. Home wasn't a place. It was a state of being, a choice to remain human in a world that too often valued expedience over ethics, control over compassion, power over principle. As the first light of dawn began to illuminate the eastern sky, Sarah allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Nightingale had completed her final mission. Sarah Blackwood could begin to imagine what might come next. In the distance, the outline of a small aircraft became visible, Rose's promised extraction. Beyond that lay uncertainty, challenges, the long process of healing for those they had rescued, and the potential fallout from the evidence they had released to the world. But for now, in this moment between darkness and dawn, there was a sense of completion, of circuits closed and debts paid, of promises kept and faith rewarded. "We're going to be okay," Eddie said quietly, as much to himself as to Sarah. "Aren't we?" Sarah reached across briefly to squeeze his arm, a rare gesture of human connection from someone who had spent years avoiding such contact. "Yes," she replied with simple certainty. "We are." 2 weeks later, a congressional committee would convene in closed session to review the evidence leaked from the Phoenix facility. 3 days after that, arrests would begin, military officers, intelligence officials, corporate executives, all connected to the program. The mysterious patriarch would remain elusive, but his network would be exposed, dismantled piece by piece. In a small town far from Arizona, Rose Dawson would reopen her diner under a new name. Among her staff would be a quiet blonde woman whose hands sometimes moved with unexpected grace and precision. Locals would come to know her simply as Sarah, the woman who made the best coffee in 3 counties, and who sometimes sat for hours watching the horizon, as if waiting for something only she could see. And on quiet evenings when the diner was empty, Rose and Sarah would sometimes sit together at the corner booth, speaking in low voices about Budapest, about roads not taken, about the price of secrets and the value of truth, about finding their way home after years in the wilderness. For Nightingale had finished her last flight, and Sarah Blackwood had finally found her way back to solid ground. Some say true strength isn't measured by what you can endure, but by what you choose to carry afterward. For Sarah Blackwood, the weight of Budapest had been a solitary burden, a ghost that followed her down endless highways as she drove her blue truck through the American desert, a phantom that whispered in the quiet hours before dawn. But ghosts, like secrets, cannot survive in the light. In exposing the Phoenix program, Sarah freed more than just the captured truckers. She freed herself from the shadows of her past. The compass around her neck that once reminded her of all she had lost now pointed toward something new, possibility. Rose's Diner still serves the best apple pie in 4 states. The corner booth remains reserved for a quiet blonde woman whose watchful eyes never quite lose their vigilance. And somewhere in Washington, behind closed doors, men in suits still whisper the name Nightingale with a mixture of fear and respect. Perhaps the most dangerous people aren't those who have nothing to lose, but those who have found something worth protecting. Something that reminds them of their humanity when the world has tried to strip it away. What would you fight for if everything you thought was lost suddenly became possible again?